Alright, and it is 6 o'clock. I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, November 21st, 2017. Is there anyone here who has anything to speak about that is not on the agenda? All right, moving right along. We have minutes from the October 17th meeting. Everyone have a chance to look at those?
Yep.
Any errors or omissions?
A motion to approve the minutes from October 17th.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Nothing. All right. So, no A&Rs, Jessica?
Nope.
No new business?
Nope.
So we're moving on to continued hearing on Kimberly Scribner, 33.5 to 35 Union Street. So you want to come up and update us on this one?
Where would you guys like us to start?
Well,
we
so
kind
the-
of left off, or first of all, I'm Zach Langlois.
Kimberly Scribner.
Thank you. So
Last time we kind of left off at the back lot was kind of the main
Yep.
gist of the
Right.
talk there.
yeah, so let's see, I just want to make sure, I think the minutes are
You
listed.
want to take a look at the revised
The,
site plan?
Yeah, let's look at that to begin with.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the things we had talked about last time is you had sort of a variety of different layouts, and this is the one you're settling on at this point? Okay. And so it's got the 12 tables there, and,
A row of arborvitaes.
right. Is that the same one we have here?
Yes,
Yep,
it is. It's
it
just
is.
that the screen is,
There you go. Just pan over a little bit.
I'm
No?
trying.
Okay, sorry.
I'm trying.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's there.
I was looking at it upside down. So we talked about the fence, so you've got a metal fence that you're planning on putting there between the cars,
Yep.
and then the arborvitae, and then the tables.
I see
And-
parking flow markers.
Yeah, so are those, is the plan to paint those arrows on there?
No.
I'm a little confused about what the arrows.
I think the architect just had, like, showing you could
Flow of
come in
traffic,
and
I
out of
think.
there and through the High Street
Yep,
entrance and exit.
I think that was just to show kind of what.
No arrows at all?
No, there will not
it's
be
all
arrows
open, right? So there's no curb at all on the
There's
front
no
there?
curb.
Okay.
completely
Yep.
open.
And it's 3 spots and then plus 1 handicapped, is that right? I'm looking at it right? Okay. I was a little confused by the comments from the city engineer, which I think referenced.
Well, he thought it might be
spots
two
are-
because the offloading ramp is in between
In
the
between the
two
two, I
bottom two,
gotcha.
but the one above the offloading area
Oh,
is
yeah.
not a handicap spot
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the plan. There's no signage for it, which
Right.
is fine.
And Jessica, so there was a whole issue, Union Court is a private way, is that right?
Yeah, so my question to DPW is they always, they have concerns about curb cuts, or if there's a new property, somebody needs to get a curb cut permit before they can actually do that. And so I know that the DPW director typically likes the curb cuts to be only as big as they need to be and not have huge curb cuts. This one looks fairly substantial, and so I just brought it to the attention of DPW to say, do you have a concern with this? And their comment is that since Union Court is a private way and not a public way under the jurisdiction of the town, they don't have a comment regarding it.
Okay.
Okay. I have a question about access. So someone parks in those spots there. How do they get into the building? Do they go around the fence line and into the building? Is there a walkway between the fence and the building?
Around the fence there is going to be a 5-foot concrete walkway
Okay.
that goes into there's a back door
Okay.
on the other side of the patio that comes into the building.
And that's a handicap accessible entrance.
Yes.
It's able to be in a wheelchair.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my
And it's
question too,
not
because
on
there's
there.
no sidewalk on Union Court there, right?
No.
Yeah.
So you're gonna put one in?
No, they
No.
don't have to. There'll be a sidewalk on the parcel there. If you look on the right, down at the bottom on the right, it actually says concrete
Okay.
sidewalk, so you'll be able to
There,
do,
right, this is the
Yeah.
sidewalk
Yeah.
right there.
Okay.
Yep.
and
then
it'll come around behind there and then
Come
enter.
around
So you come
behind.
around, there's fencing around the perimeter of the court. There's no fencing between There's a little bit here, but then it's open
Yes.
between here and here, so that there's flow between the two buildings, since they've got entrances at the back of both of these areas.
Okay.
And then there's fencing here, because this is the Chamber of Commerce building, so it's to prevent people from wandering into that location.
Right.
So the fencing is here, and then it comes up and around like that, and then there's a row of arborvitae's here for an additional buffer between the patio and the parking lot.
Okay.
And then
Thank you.
there's gonna be plantings along, what's the left side there, right? That's the side of the building, or is that
Well, it just says perennial plantings, but it doesn't really say what it
low-growing
is.
perennial
Yeah, it's just gonna
vegetation?
be stuff that can be cut back for snow removal.
Okay.
We typically don't ask for a species when it comes to perennials.
Yeah.
No.
I was fine with that.
And then, so then the other two issues that we had talked about were trash and snow removal. So you want to talk a little bit about what the plan is for that? I know we got some correspondence on, I think on both of them.
You did.
Yeah.
Duso's here.
Yeah, so we had spoken with Duso Trucking and kind of showed them the space and area, and they said that they would have kind of no problem really pulling up to unload and, to remove the trash there with the given space. And even with a car parked in the spots behind there, they said they would still have plenty of room to come in on the diagonal.
So their plan, they would get it from, as we're looking at it, on the right side, or would they come in
Like
over?
on the other side of the dumpsters, like the top of the plan.
Oh,
is
from
where they're
across,
gonna come in
okay.
from.
Okay.
From the top.
Let me know if I'm pointing in the wrong spot.
No, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
that goes street and then an open parking lot behind that.
So there's no, it's not like there are parking spots on the other side of those dumpsters. That's the
No, it's
entrance
the-
and exit to the parking lot
Yeah,
over there,
that's
right?
that's the High Street
Yep.
road
Okay.
there. Yep. And then just on the other side of that, there are, I believe, 3 or 4 parking spots that are in that parking lot.
Right,
Yep.
okay. And then the snow removal, the snow is gonna be piled there on the top right as we look at it, is that right?
We're actually gonna pilot it against the parking spaces there,
Right here.
as
In front-
opposed
yeah,
to.
we were gonna do arborvitae's along the front of the parking spots there on the left-hand side, but we're no longer gonna do that. We're gonna leave that open for room to push snow against the building.
And-
Okay.
And this,
And there's a
and
spot
up here is also identified on the plan as the snow
Yep.
removal area, so there's 2 of them. There's one here, there's one here.
And then obviously, if it is a long winter or too much snow gets piled up, we will have it removed by
Right,
by
so
someone. Yep.
just for the record, so there's a letter from Arthur Jones, who I believe spoke last week, right, or last meeting, the owner of the property, saying that he'll be responsible for it, and in the event that there's excess snow, that you can have it removed from the property.
Yep.
That seems reasonable. I think the only other issue that we had discussed last time is, sort of any idea about drainage and water, since we're converting this from what's now grass to paved surface and
So
concrete.
this just was submitted before the meeting. This is from Donald Alexander from Broadbrook Landscaping. And it says that he's done an analysis of the pitch for drainage on the above referenced property. Find there's a 9.5-inch pitch over a distance of 65 feet from the back of the building to the pavement, which begins on the property of Claire and Edward Corbeil. This pitch will allow proper drainage of water to existing storm drains.
Okay.
Okay. That's reasonable.
Anybody have any other questions or comments, concerns?
I guess we covered all of them that we had.
I think so.
Yeah.
I motion to approve the site plan approval for.
Hold on.
I just want to state for the record that there was another, this wasn't discussed as the easement agreement that the applicant has with the property owner to the back
Yeah,
to,
that's
to allow for delivery trucks to pass and repass over the paved portion of the property. So they have a signed agreement with the property owners to allow that.
Access
And
through that
trash
parking lot
Yes.
there?
Stuff.
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, that's helpful too.
That's
Those
great.
were also something else you asked for.
Thank you. All right, Jim?
Motion stands.
Alright.
To what? What's the motion?
To approve the site plan approval for 33.5 and 35 Union Street.
I guess before we, I should have asked this beforehand, but
Right.
should we attach all these documents to the, that the owner will remove the snow and that
Should
the,
that go all with it?
all
Well,
this documentation
So
too?
the decision, the way it will be drafted is it will reference both dated plans.
Mhm.
It will reference in the findings that these documents, that the board finds that there was no impact to the abutting properties
Yeah.
because there's an agreement with the owner, because,
Okay.
everything will
And the
be in
property
the
owner will
findings.
remove so,
If there's
sorry.
anything above and beyond which has not been submitted that you want to set as a condition, then now is the time to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with everything that's
It's
submitted.
just that the items that were mentioned to be put in. I
Okay.
agree with that.
Then I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? All right,
Congratulations.
Great.
Thank you very much,
Good
guys.
luck with it.
so.
Okay, so the
Bye.
next steps is I will draft the decision. We've got 14 days to do that, and then because it's a site plan approval, there's no appeal period, so once you have it in hand, you're good to go. All right?
Thank you.
All righty.
All right, moving right along,
Moving right along.
our continued discussion of zoning for recreational marijuana and proposed zoning.
Yay.
All right,
Did anyone go to that meeting? I think you posted about it, Jessica. There was a meeting that happened, I think it was, Margaret Hurley recently?
hey folks, guys, if you could chat outside, that'd be great, thank you.
Talking about timelines and such.
I didn't, because I had already seen her present at the workshop that Jesse and I went to in Worcester, that was put on by what was it put on by? MMA or MLA?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had already sort of heard her, and I spoke with her directly on the phone, so I didn't feel like I needed to go personally, but.
So none of us went. I had a board meeting, Easthampton Media, that night. I couldn't make it, alas.
Which one was this?
Well, it seemed that one of the topics she was going over was the need for speed, essentially to have something in place before the April 1st application deadline.
Who was the speaker?
Do you remember her name precisely?
It's the woman from the municipal
Oh,
law.
from the Attorney General's office?
Yeah, Margaret Hurley.
Hurley,
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, I think that's definitely one of her concerns. I mean, she's not,
She's looking at it, and she's looking at it from the best interest of the municipalities in terms of making sure they don't get into legal trouble.
right,
So, and I think it's really has more to do with communities that have to go through a town meeting process, that they only have town meeting in May, which is after
Way after, yeah.
the license is gonna be valid at the state level. And that's what a lot of communities are putting moratoriums, is because they're towns and have town meeting, and it's a much more,
Yeah,
oh,
they
but
have like a
even here,
3-month
we have a
approval
long,
process.
we need a lot of lead time to get things to
Absolutely.
city council, to ordinance, to city
Absolutely.
council. And I think that what we've acknowledged all along is we're gonna give sort of a best case scenario to city council, and they're gonna be the ones, whether regulations come down early and it's when we're having joint committees with ordinance, or whether it comes out later than that and it's just with the city council, they're gonna have to respond if they need to
I had a
and modify
conversation
them.
with Salem, and they've added it to their ordinance subcommittee agenda, so I know it's on their agenda now. And
but
he
nothing's
certainly
been
expressed.
filed. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
No, but nothing, the process is that the committee has to officially file something
Yeah, we have to
with
send something to them.
ordinance, and then it goes to the full committee, which then kicks it to
Agreed.
ordinance. So I
Agreed.
don't know if him just
So-
having it on there expedites, it
Well,
maybe
well,
it does, I don't know.
I think that it starts us to think that there's more discussion about it. What's more, I got a sense from him, and I agree, that it's time for us to move. And
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that while we're making progress, that our regular process, especially, and I hate to mention this, but as devastating as it is for our community, there's not much.
I only have one more meeting.
You have one more meeting, and that's gonna be a real problem for this process for us. I'm thinking that we may be at a point where we might need to set up a subcommittee that can meet more regularly to try to put together some real zoning bylaw and bring it to this committee in a environment where instead of piecemealing it together, we can approve it.
I
and
don't
send
think
it
we have
forward.
much more to add to this. I mean, I
No.
think that we'll be able to have something by the, I mean,
Did you look at
We can't-
Salem's? The city of Salem's?
I did, and what's more,
A lot of good stuff in there.
There's
Yeah.
one or six.
I think,
I mean, some of
there's
those,
some
I think,
excellent-
yeah, I think, it could be a
material.
matter of lifting some stuff out of there. I think it's a matter of the examples that I pulled regarding the line cues. I don't know if you took a look at that, but it wasn't necessarily in regards to marijuana, it was
Aspen.
ATMs.
right.
Yeah.
But it's language regarding
then
line cues.
Trucks, yeah.
And food trucks, yeah, the other one was the food truck. So, you know, it's a matter, I think, of just picking that language, it's highlighted, it's there, we could lift it. I mean,
Right.
zoning is all about plagiarism, quite frankly, and making sure that it works within your system.
I
It's
think
like
we
the
can go
only
even quicker
time you're
without
allowed
a
to
subcommittee
plagiarize.
is what- I mean, I
If-
think that,
If
because the other
we
thing.
think we can buckle down and do it, I'm all in.
Because the other
I
thing
just
is,
wanna see
while
us
we're
do
in
it.
a rush, we have a new city council starting in January, right? So like, part of it is we wanna get it to them in January, but before then, I think probably we'll end up waiting until January anyway. So like, I think this meeting and next meeting, if we can submit something after the next hearing.
Well, that's the funny thing, is that's what January is, it's this meeting and the next meeting.
Right.
You actually have a third, you have a third one.
Okay.
So
Right.
you've got this meeting, you've got December 5th, which
Well,
I'm here
oh, yeah.
for,
And the 19th.
and then you've got the 5th and the 19th,
Right.
right? So I won't be here the 19th, doesn't mean that I can't have Jamie be here on the
Right.
19th and help sort of carry the ball over the finish line here. But I wholeheartedly, you know, you need to dropped in council by, I'd say, the first week in January.
Right.
And I don't even know what the committee assignments are gonna be yet. So they still have to do that. Everybody gets sworn in, then there's committee assignments. That takes some time. I don't know how long it takes, but it takes some time. So, I mean, realistically, I don't even know what the council, meeting schedule is for January yet. But they may not even be kicking it to subcommittee until the 17th, and then scheduling the joint public hearings.
Right.
Right.
So I think that's when we may need to do some scheduling and try and crunch things to get, look, we may have to have a special meeting that's a joint meeting with ordinance
I
at
think
that
so.
point.
I think you should I
To
think you
get it-
should anyway, because I think
Right.
there'll be enough people in the room that I think it'll be,
Right.
I wouldn't recommend you adding it to a standard
Somebody
agenda. I
else's,
think you
yeah.
need to have a separate,
I like that.
a joint public
So,
hearing.
Jim, my thought is to go through what's missing in here and some of the things from the other towns that we've pulled this week, and try to at least give direction to Jessica. She's got nothing else to do in the last few weeks here, to put together something, so
Yeah.
we have like, if not a full draft at the end of the next, like for the next meeting, but at
Right.
least close enough so that we can.
I love that we all seem to be in agreement about the pressing timeline.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
So-
It's gonna
I'm
take,
terrified by the timeline.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
I don't, I'm hoping that the regs are easy and like mesh with what we're doing, because otherwise we may be scrambling for a moratorium or something like that in February, because
I think you can keep it simple enough and still cover the topics that have been discussed
Right.
and have been brought to the board as concerns. I just keep it simple.
Right.
Like, you know, don't
So
overcomplicate
let's do it. Let's pick one
Yeah.
of those that you brought and figure out. You mentioned the
All
Aspen.
right, well, do you want to go over where we're at now? The
Yeah, let's
drafts
go what
up
we
on
have.
On the whatchamacallit there, the screen, for our viewers at home. Not really, viewers in the room. This is all on the city's website, by the way. Every iteration of this has been up there, so you can see the evolution of,
This is the November 6th draft.
this is the November 6th.
So,
So, okay, so this last version, I lifted the definition of craft marijuana cultivator cooperative because we started to talk about that. And just left it, should there be standards developed such as limit size of building or something like that. So, you know, we could just take it out. I haven't seen any other examples of where that's being, I don't think Salem's got it in theirs.
no, actually, in one
No,
of
I
them,
didn't
cooperative
see
are
that.
not allowed.
yeah, that's right. Someone did do it.
But it was something that the board
One of them.
talked about. Let's see, let's review the other.
Can I read it?
Did
Yeah.
you find it?
Yeah, well, I mean, our definition that she wrote.
Oh, yeah.
wanna
I just
read
lifted
to
it out of the law.
I just
I
want to
didn't.
make sure it makes sense. Craft marijuana cultivator cooperative, a marijuana cultivator comprised of residents of the Commonwealth as a limited liability company or limited liability partnership under the laws of the Commonwealth, or an appropriate business structure as determined by the Commission, and that is licensed to cultivate, obtain, manufacture, process, package, and brand marijuana and marijuana products to deliver marijuana to marijuana establishments, but not the consumer. I find it interesting that it spends so much time on what kind of company formation
Yeah.
it is.
Well,
there
when
a
we
reason
talked
for
about that a couple meetings ago, I mean, I think it's an incredibly broad thing that, like, some of it sounded like great things that we really liked, and other things sound like, you know, mass production kind of things. I mean, I think it could be any number of things. I don't know that we know how that will be used going forward.
I mean, I think the only real indication is that it's wholesale, essentially, is what's being said, because it's not to the consumer.
Right.
And that's really the meat of it, is the last word.
Right.
Yeah, it's like it's like craft brewers getting together and doing craft weed, but they're for wholesaling.
Or it's just two partners in an LLC that are running a multi-million-dollar weed farm in a
This is-
10 million square foot warehouse.
This is why we have an attorney
Right, I
on
mean,
the
that's,
board.
that's two Massachusetts residents that are in an LLC, right? So like,
Right.
I love the craft beer guys that are working together and pooling their resources, and that
Yeah.
sounds really cool and like something we'd love to do. I don't see how it precludes someone coming in and sort of undercutting other people and just producing on a large scale, but
So maybe it
I don't know
doesn't
that I have
go
a
in
problem
there at
with that
all.
either.
Maybe it's added, maybe it's overcomplicating it, but I just put it in there because it was a point of discussion that we
Discussed it,
had.
I actually like having it in. It indicates that we thought about it and that it's something that was considered, which is true.
it's in
we
the
did.
statute, yeah.
And the only, and I like it in general, the only thing I sort of question, and I defer to you as a lawyer on this, is, you know, what about an S corp? Is that included in an appropriate business structure? Why even have any of that stuff about business structure? Who are we
Well,
trying-
as
who are we
determined
trying
by
to-
the commission, so that's something else we're waiting for the state regs. So I presume that they will say in their regs, a craft marijuana cultivator cooperative must be a limited liability corporation, or can be an S corp or any other kind of corporate entity, or, I mean,
And
we
maybe,
don't know.
like, maybe this is getting too far down
Are
into
we
the
hoping
business
that
model
it's
that
gonna
the
be?
zoning doesn't need to address. The zoning really is looking at
I
the
agree.
location
Right.
I agree
and the
with that.
use, and so maybe it's
Strike
not,
that part.
it's not a relevant part of this discussion.
Yep.
I think
You
we
know,
strike that
I
part.
think it's worth noting and sort of keeping in the back of your mind as this industry rolls out and, you know, maybe something comes up, but zoning is not, you know, etched in stone. You can amend it, you can change
Right.
it. If something's not working, fix it.
Right,
A
So,
marijuana cultivator that is licensed to cultivate, obtain, blah, blah, blah.
Take it
So
out.
go from comprised to that is licensed. Pull
well,
that
why don't we
part
just
out.
take it out? We don't care what the business model
Well,
is, do we?
I like the piece about marijuana cultivator being in there, just not the comprised of to commission and.
But you have a marijuana
We have a
cultivator
marijuana
as a
cultivator
definition.
already.
We have it.
Fair enough.
I don't know what that adds, actually.
Oh, okay,
Right.
you're right. I'm sorry. didn't
I
see
think
the
it's,
seal
I
up.
think that you're
Come
right,
out.
Jessica, that
No,
this
you're
is gonna
right.
be something
You're right.
special that the state commission is gonna regulate some way differently. And it will still fall under our zoning either way.
Right. It's a cultivator is a
So
cultivator
it
is a
probably does
cultivator, right?
complicate it to add it.
I
Yeah.
agree.
All right, take it out.
Get rid of it.
Keep it.
Bye-bye.
You're right, that is the.
And we
same.
can bring it up at one of the many future public hearings on this language if we change our minds too.
All right, let's go down to applicability, which is section 3.
Yep,
And so last we determined that the independent testing laboratory, the cultivator, the product manufacturer are permitted by special permit in the mixed-use mill industrial zoning and site plan approval in the industrial zones, which is consistent with the medical marijuana zoning that we have in
Right.
place.
Say we lock that in.
That
That
we've locked that
stays.
in. That
Yep,
is,
that's locked in.
solid.
Yep.
That is solid. Okay. Marijuana retailer is permitted by special permit in the highway business and site plan approval in downtown business and mixed-use industrial. And we've got this comment on the side that there was a concern about the abutter notification.
Yeah.
cranky Jesse. I
No,
will note
not
that
cranky
all
Jesse.
of them in Salem require special permits,
Right.
even the laboratories and cultivators and manufacturers. But, I mean, I think the thing is, this is one where we don't know about the regulations.
We're just talking about downtown business. I want to just be specific.
Yeah,
Downtown business and mixed-use mill industrial.
right.
And just to help frame this, can you give me an example of where you think an abutter notification would be appropriate in one of those environments? I mean, just.
I mean, I think in either of those, I think if you're gonna open up a retailer in the downtown business district, that it's not the kind of business where I would want somebody to wake up one day and find out that there was no notice and a retailer is going in. So not that there's necessarily anything they can or should do about it. I just feel like it's one of those things that we want to notify people that it's coming and give people an opportunity to be involved.
I agree completely.
And so, I mean, I would be okay dropping back to this if something happens with the licensing that is similar to the alcohol licenses that we've talked about. But there's nothing right now. So, I mean, my suggestion would be to put it as special permit, and if we get further in the process with city council or after we're done and there are other safeguards in place where they're requiring notice to abutters, I don't mind going down to the sort of less stringent requirement of site plan approval, although, other than the notice, there's not a real big difference in the two of them anyway. So if they're obligated to give notice through the commission or something like that, then to me, I don't see a benefit to the special permit process other than the abutter notice, which,
So it's really about the abutter notification, but I just want to throw another test out there, which
Yep.
is my way of helping
Yeah.
myself through this. And I don't know the answer to this really. For a bar, would a bar follow the same criteria as site plan approval in one of these spaces in downtown business or mixed use, no industrial, and order? And I didn't bring my red book, Jessica. You feel free to
And
ask.
you know what? I didn't bring my zoning
So-
book either.
No, you
I-
really
But we
should.
talked
I
about-
know, I'm out. Out of here.
No, but we
I
did-
wonder if we're holding it to a higher standard.
right, so that was where because the ABCC and the License Commission required butter notification.
That's
So
right.
there were some places
Okay,
where
I
it's
remember
special
that.
permit and
Good.
some site plan.
Yeah.
But there's a state entity that's requiring a butter notice for all of them.
and beyond.
And so that may exist under this commission. It wouldn't shock me at all if the commission simply says any retailer or any marijuana cultivator or anything provides a butter notice within 300 feet or 500 feet or whatever. But right now, there's nothing that does that.
I don't think they have to do that under medical. I don't think they require butter notifications under the medical.
But it's only
not
I
under
don't
medical.
remember.
But it's
don't-
only in certain areas, right?
Not-
No, I mean, I think there's the buffer that's in the medical, that's under the state regs.
Right.
But there's no,
That's
I don't
500.
believe
I
that
can't
they.
remember in the state reg how
I
it
don't
shook
think
out.
they
I mean,
do. I think that notification goes through the zoning.
Yeah, I think the,
I remember
um,
that part.
I mean, I think that's a big distinction between the medical and the recreational, though, is that it's a public storefront as
Yeah,
opposed to.
there's so much
Right.
traffic that's
Right.
gonna happen at these facilities.
I think
know.
there's, I think, and I think that these businesses may pose legitimate logistical hurdles independent of what they are selling. That I think that is more my concern than will people be out there picketing the fact that there's gonna be somebody selling marijuana on the street. It's more the fact that I think that it's gonna be complicated, especially at first, and I think the more people that are involved in that process, it will help us to understand what's happening, and I think I would wanna know if I was in a butter, that something like this was coming in,
Absolutely.
and so I feel like that's important, so.
Even as a business, I mean,
That's what I
most of
mean.
the stuff is in business zones, so I mean, it's not like you're gonna have a lot of residents out there that are abutters, but if I was a business, I would wanna know that there was a marijuana retailer going in next to me, just so I knew what to expect.
Right.
Lines in front of my, potentially lines, or lots more traffic, or whatever it might be.
Odor.
Potential odor, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's.
Yeah,
I mean, odor is the basis of nuisance
Right.
Yep.
zoning.
And there is some good language in here about odor
Yes.
mitigation, so I mean,
Yep.
so we could take that too.
But it also doesn't, I mean, it doesn't, it just gives people notice. It doesn't make it any harder.
Well, I will say that the main difference between special permit and site plan approval is that site plan approval is a by right use that
Right.
has some site review by the board. Special permit, you can say no.
Right.
right.
So there's that discretionary, which is why developers don't like it, because it's a risk to them, there's extra money that they may have to put in to make sure they meet the standards. But that being said, most of the stuff that we look at under special permit, which is, traffic flow, where the building is in relation, wetlands, all that stuff,
Yeah.
is not gonna be relevant under downtown business. So there really is gonna be a small scope of things that the board will look at, but it will provide that notification, and it will provide the ability
To say no.
to
And
say no, but
there might be
when
legitimate
was the
reasons
last
to
time we
say
said
no.
no to anything?
Well,
but-
and really, it's conditioning anyways, which is what you do under site plan approval. I mean,
Yeah,
like
but
I said-
under this, there could be an issue of saying no.
But under
Well,
site
just
plan
because, like, what
approval.
if
There's an issue of saying no, no matter what it is. If it's in the zoning, and if you follow the site plan approval
Right.
criteria, and they meet the criteria, there's absolutely no reason why the board should be saying no.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Not at all.
And site plan approval doesn't allow for a flat no, but it allows conditions to the point
Absolutely.
where it serves the same purpose. So, I mean, I
Right.
think that it's,
It is a higher standard, though, and
It is.
and it's to be considered the ramifications fully, such that that may call out certain businesses that are just on the cutting edge of having enough money to pull this off, and and
well,
these
but that's what
additional
my point,
fees
because
of the process.
I don't think that it adds that much of a burden beyond the notice to an applicant as far as what they're actually going to prepare. I think that part is pretty comparable, even though the way it gets looked at.
As
is
I
different.
evaluate that and consider it in a way, I come to the same conclusion.
Okay, so we're gonna change that to special permit.
And
Okay.
like I said, I mean, we're gonna be involved as this goes forward, and if there are state regs about notice, then
Okay.
that may alleviate that concern.
Okay,
Yeah.
moving on. Good job.
It may help us.
We added a standard and condition at the last meeting that says all types of commercial marijuana establishments relative to the cultivation, processing, testing, product manufacturing, retail, or any other type of state licensed marijuana-related business must take place within a fully enclosed building.
Right, we did that
Right.
last time, right, so the no outdoor commercial,
Yeah, no outdoor at all.
Okay?
Here in Easthampton, I mean,
right.
with our
that was the
abundant
main thing.
agricultural land, I don't think this is relevant, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
That was good.
So, that's where we're at.
all right, so then, Jessica, you found us some other language. One of the things that we had noted was parking.
So what do you, I mean, do you want me to pull up Salem's first and just take a look at it?
Sure.
Sure. I also wanna, yeah, let's look at that one first.
Going to council approval in Salem, if it hasn't already.
Pepperell,
It's the thick one.
yeah. it's-
So, looking at their,
So Salem, Mass, they've gotten pretty far with this.
it's on my
they
sheet.
have, so I looked at their zoning map to get a sense of what these letters all meant.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the Rs are all residential. Now, I looked at it so long ago, I can't remember what it is. They're just different forms. I think the B4 is kind of like their highway business one. I'm sorry, I can't recall. I looked at
Yeah.
it
The
too
only
long
one in
ago now.
question
And
is BPD.
that's like a business district, and it's like right in the downtown,
It's
I
downtown.
think.
It's
The peanut butter
Yeah.
district.
Yeah, so-
And, the BA is by approval, is that right? Like for whether it's allowed or not,
Yeah,
there's Y and N,
Yep,
or by,
Yes, no.
it's probably by site plan approval, or by,
yeah, I think this one was special permit.
So we essentially have the chart already, though,
Yep.
Right.
defined.
We've already done this part.
Yep.
oh wait, I do have it here. B1 is business neighborhood, B2 is business highway, B4 is wholesale and automotive, B5 is central development, I is industrial, and BPD is business park development.
Business park,
okay.
okay.
Makes sense.
And so the marijuana testing facility in B2 or the business park are the only two that are by right uses for that
Wow.
in those zones. But Jim's right, I think we've done this basically by where we've put
Yeah,
them
we
in our
have this.
zones,
We've already
right?
figured this out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
we have this.
I think it's a matter of really looking at I like their purpose statement, to be honest. And it's just.
Shall I read it?
If you'd like.
Well, is it's,
Yeah,
Here,
you
I
like
can pull-
reading things, so.
I
Oh,
can
yeah, we
pull
got
it.
it on the screen.
We have it on the screen.
There we go.
I can pull it up.
Right.
How do we get to the next, who's what's it? There we
There you
go.
are.
There it is. I think you should probably still read it.
The purpose of, here, I'll read it. The
Yeah.
purpose of this ordinance is to allow state licensed retail marijuana establishments to exist in the city of Salem in accordance with applicable state laws and regulations and impose reasonable safeguards to govern the time, place, and manner of marijuana establishment operations and any business dealing in marijuana accessories in such a way as to ensure public health, safety, well-being, and undue impacts on the natural environment as it relates to cultivation, processing, and manufacturing, subject to the provisions of this zoning ordinance, blah, blah, blah.
Good.
All right, one thing stood out to me right off. Ours is provide safe and effective access and regulate the place and manner.
Oh,
It
it's-
doesn't have our language about consistent with the character of Easthampton and not unreasonably impracticable.
yeah.
What's interesting is it's through the ZBA, not the planning board, for these
Yeah.
special permits.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're the same enough to me that it doesn't matter.
I mean, this Salem, in general, I think the Salem ordinance looks very much like the medical that we did.
I like all the different requirements under the general provision, 6.10.6. I think there's some good items in there about, what, no odor for marijuana cultivation, processing, manufacturing, or
Right.
retail may be a noxious or cause public nuisance. It talks about, distances from each other.
Security plan.
Let's pick on one. Let's start with the odor and see if it's something we can incorporate.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Well, I like that marijuana establishments shall not be located in mobile structures, and that's really important, obviously. But that's something I don't think we have in ours, and I think we should add it in.
I mean, do you wanna just go through these one at
Sure.
a time here,
Yeah.
under the general provisions?
Oh, I don't think I can go up, I can only go down.
You can only go down?
Am I the only one thinking of Walter White?
We'll catch up with you.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So the first one is security operation and emergency plan, which I think we have language very similar to this in our medical. Jessica, doesn't that sound right?
An O&M plan?
Yeah. Well,
Where we have
security.
you have to get confirmation from the police department and the fire
Right.
department, right, about,
I only remember my zoning book. Yes, I think it's,
Why,
for what?
why do we need that for our retail?
I don't know if we need a security plan. I don't know if we need. Well, I don't know. I don't feel like you need a security plan, but O&M plan.
Well, I think like what we've talked about from these other states, like how they're regulating the way the cash is and where it is in relation to the customers and where the product is. I mean, I think that's something that,
we advise any marijuana business that's coming to us to make sure that they're in good communication with the police department about
Yeah.
what their security is gonna be, cause they care. The police department cares and they wanna sign off on it before it gets too far along. So I don't see any reason without having somebody submit a security plan to the police department. They should be doing it anyway, but
Right.
require them to submit it to the police department and,
somewhere.
and the planning board.
Yeah. Well, that's what it says to the police department to demonstrate there is limited
I mean, I see
undue
no,
burden to
I
the city
see
public.
no reason why not to
The
require
only
that.
security plan that I recall having come through here was the dog and pony show for the medical marijuana that came through, and those
Right.
guys were very well put together.
Yeah, and you're
Um,
gonna see it
But-
again.
But what kind of burden is that to someone that's trying to start a rather mundane, small operation compared to that giant 90,000, now 60 at the time, now 90,000 square foot facility? I mean, is that, now, don't get me wrong.
It's only a
Overall,
project-
I like this idea, but I wanna question it and make sure that we're following through on it. How much does a plan cost to make if we require everyone to do it?
I
Does it
don't-
make
I don't
it-
think it was like a production of a
Practical.
plan. I think it's, you communicate with the police department and you would say like, this is where we're keeping our money, this is where our deliveries are made, this is what our, staff is. I've got the medical
When
in
the
here.
armored car is planning to show up this
Yeah.
many times a
Yeah.
week.
I mean,
It
it
could
all
be a
This is the,
sounds
two-page doc.
this
good
is
to
the
me.
video, I mean,
I agree.
anybody who's opening a business should be doing this anyway, and if they're
Right.
not, they shouldn't be going into business.
And frankly, I think
Quite
communicating with
frankly.
the police department is a great thing for everyone. Everyone should,
Right.
that
Yeah.
has a business. But in terms of our requirement here, I just
I
want
mean,
to
I
make sure
think
we
that-
know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that will be in the state regs as well, because there's a
It's
lot of that.
definitely gonna be something in the state regs about it,
Yeah.
for sure.
They'll have to have communication with the police department.
Yeah.
Some way or another,
Yep. I mean, I think that whole number one.
even
with
if
the
it's through an alarm system.
security, O&M, and emergency response plan are all important. I mean, they don't have to be 60-page documents.
An
They can-
operation and management plan? What is that?
It's basically what they tell us anyway when they come in. Here's
Yeah.
the properties, here's the hours of operation, here's the staffing.
Emergency response plan?
I don't know about the O&M plan, that seems a little bit
Yeah,
much
it's
to
a
me
little
personally.
far-fetched, but
I'm buying into the security plan, I really am, because I believe wholeheartedly in the involvement with the police force. I think that makes for a better community and just avoids problems to have people connected. I
Well,
think
keep
it's a
in mind
benefit.
that these provisions are for everything, it's not just retail.
right.
This is for cultivation, manufacturing, testing, and retail. So I think if you've got a company that's doing extractions, and they need to be talking to the fire department about how their extractions are working and what are they using for fuel, and, again, every company that we've talked to, even future alcohol-related companies that are looking to come here are talking to us about what their extraction process is.
Right.
And I think it's important for them to communicate that to the fire department, and that's part of their submittals,
I'd like to see us lift, this is me, you guys have to agree before this goes, Jessica. Section 1, A, 1 and 2, and C.
So.
What if you allowed a waiver provision?
What do you refer
So,
to precisely?
I'm not saying no to you, what you're saying, because
No,
I
it's
think
cool.
I
No,
agree,
it's
I think
good.
I agree with you. And again, I'm just the sidekick here, you guys are the decision makers. So, but what if there's a provision in there, like under the special permit language, it allows the board to waive certain requirements. So for instance, if there's something that, and this is kind of more dealt on the administrative level, like I'll advise the applicants, you don't need to do a full-blown traffic mitigation plan. Like, as long as you provide trip generations and this, I think that'd be fine, but if the board wants more, you know, but the zoning specifically says that for these certain things, they need a full transportation plan. So what if there was some language in there that allowed the board to waiver certain requirements based on,
It's kind of like what we do with 40 R and 40B, where we waiver certain things in exchange.
well,
for
40B is waiver of, this is a waiver of the submittal requirements.
But
This
if you
isn't-
look,
so,
I think
yeah.
a waiver isn't a bad idea, especially if it's a
Just for
hardship or
submittal
something.
requirements, so saying like, we don't need a security plan on this one, or we don't feel like we need a
And that would just be a
emergency
decision of the
response
board.
plan for a retail because they're not doing anything combustible. That's what
They
I'm
would
just
come and
trying
ask
to.
for a waiver, and we would either give it or not.
Okay,
But
got
if you
it.
look at this O&M plan and what it requires, almost all of these are things that someone should answer off the top of their head.
Anyway, that's what I'm
Organizational
saying.
structure,
Right.
location, property description, that's easy.
Mhm.
Hours of operation and staffing,
They would tell
easy.
us that anyway.
But that's
Cultivation
gonna be-
practices,
it's duplicative.
Right,
It-
no,
it-
that's what I mean, but so this
Yeah.
is all information you already have, so like, I don't know that you're gonna say like, this has to be a standalone document, but like,
Okay.
the only things in here that take any real, I guess, research would be an electrical system overview,
Which I don't care about.
proposed energy demand and electrical demand offsets. I don't know what that
I
really gets at.
actually
That,
kind of like that. They have some stuff in there about
That
energy
maybe-
efficiency, which I kind of,
and also
to be
proposed
honest.
water system and utility demand, which again, I mean, if you're talking about someone who's got a small operation, that may not be a concern, but if you've got someone that's got a huge operation, I think that's one of the things that would impact city resources. But, I mean, most of this is stuff that I think isn't really anything.
I think the energy
Just-
thing is interesting because these are energy hog industries. And they're already talking about how unsustainable from an environmental standpoint some of these businesses are. So
Having some leverage to convince people to use LEDs instead
Right.
of
Yes.
HVAC and stuff, I think
Yes.
that's a
Well,
benefit.
and forcing someone to sit down and think like, boy, you know what, we are gonna use this much energy, can we use less?
right.
I don't
mean-
like anything else in that section, though. I think we should create a new section for it, or just pull that piece.
Well, I don't think there's anything else in here that we won't get in everything else. That's what I'm saying, is that like, organizational, like, location is gonna be the second line on your application, like, none of that is important.
It's part of the special permit requirements.
So-
Your application for a special permit, you have to show your location. You have to have a property description. You know,
So
you've got to
relabel
do all that
B
stuff.
as energy efficiency plan, and put in just the section about.
The only stuff that's different in here is things like your cultivation practices, the,
Are you guys saying just keep
employee
it the way it
safety,
is?
like, that's
No.
not stuff that
Duplicative
you
or-
ask
okay,
for.
yeah.
But that's what, the O and M is looking at the operation of the facility itself, I think. It's the staffing and, I mean, sometimes you guys ask those questions anyway, like, what are
Right.
your hours of
I would.
operation and how many staff
Well,
are
I
you
think
gonna
for
have?
something
and-
like this, we'd be more inclined to ask for
Ask
those
that
details
anyway.
anyways. I mean, we did a lot of that with the medical marijuana facility, and I mean, that's something that we're,
So keep 1A, 1 and 2, relabel B, energy efficiency plan, keep the section about energy efficiency, and keep C.
And call one security, energy, and emergency plans instead of security operations.
We can just
Yeah.
call it, I'll figure out the formatting and
Okay.
Okay.
just tell me the language you want and I'll figure out how to make it make
I
sense.
think it's just where it starts at electrical system overview. Does that sound good?
Yep, electrical system
Agreed.
overview, proposed energy demand and proposed electrical demand offsets.
So
I
you-
don't care about do we care about ventilation and air quality?
Well,
Proposed
we
water
do, that's a
systems?
crucial part, because it's the odor control and
That's-
the.
yeah,
Right.
that's
I
part of it.
agree.
I mean, that's an easy one though, right? That's we're a closed system, we get our stuff filtered
Yep.
before
Definitely
it's sent
something that's
out.
doing this kind of business will be thinking about it.
Okay.
Right, water system and utility, I think those are the ones that are,
confused.
Okay.
So can I just clarify so I understand? So
Yes.
keeping the security plan?
We're
Yes.
keeping a security plan.
Yes.
The
Yes.
B operation and management plan will say all marijuana establishments shall submit, and we can say operation management plan to the building department and shall include. So get. I
But
guess-
not limited
But it's not
to.
limited to. So the following elements: colon.
right.
So organizational
Strike
structure, you don't
everything.
care about?
No, we're going all the way to striking everything until you get to electrical system overview.
All that,
Because we're gonna
Okay.
get that other places.
Do we care about sanitation requirements
No, because it's, as she said, I love the word duplicative. We already have it as part of the.
elsewhere? Okay.
As part of the process.
So if it's elsewhere, then let's not put it here.
So electrical system overview, proposed energy demand and proposed electrical demand offsets, ventilation system, air quality, proposed water system, and utility demand?
Yep,
Yeah, I think
Because
that's all
that's,
good.
that's something you consider under the special permit anyway.
right.
right.
You already have, there's already a finding regarding utility use.
I know, but I think it's good for them to look at it. I like what Jim's saying, like, they're
Okay.
gonna look
From
at
an
this in advance
efficiency.
when they're putting it together.
Should we maybe re-look at this and call it some sort of like energy efficiency?
Well,
Yeah, the word plan is the thing that concerns me
Or-
the most. Like, I
don't
don't want a
know.
business, I want them to be able to come in and answer these questions. I don't want them to feel like they have to go out and pay $1,000 to have someone put together a 50-page document.
Because an O&M really is about staffing.
but so the
in my
other thing
mind.
here is both of these, the security plan is after the application. It's prior to an issuance of a CO, and the O&M one is prior to an issuance of a building permit. So I think even under the Salem ones, I don't think they would come into their hearing with any of this information.
Would you want that?
I kind of think we do.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, the security plan, I think, is between the applicant and,
The police
The
department.
police and the
We just
fire.
wanna know that they're doing it.
right.
So
No,
this
we
would
would
be, I would
suggest that they
categorize
would-
this under additional application requirements. So like, think of the solar bylaw,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So they have a special permit, but then they have to provide, insurance, they have to show proof that they've got an agreement with the utility.
Right.
Like, those are the additional items in addition to so think of it that way.
Yep.
That These are like additional
like that.
items that you're asking for that packet.
That's good.
Okay.
I think that's right. So I think like the
Right.
security plan, what we want is proof that you've communicated a security plan with the, I mean, I don't know if we need approval by the,
I mean, the way that the special permit works anyway is that when I
they're gonna
get
get
it,
notice.
I notify all the departments for comment. Police isn't typically one that I, send to.
But in
Usually it's
this
fire,
case, you
because it
would.
has more to do with access and sprinklers and that sort of thing. Police, I rarely
I think you
send
did
them
on
something.
medical though, because I
I
think we
think,
got
well, I think they already had that figured
Right.
out before
Way
they
in
even
advance.
came
Right.
here. That was them being smart applicants and
But I
smart
think I
business
remember
people.
something from the chief about that, like a comment that was,
Mhm.
this has been done kind of
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
Um,
I would keep it in there just because it's not on the typical
Yeah.
special permit list of people who get notified.
But I think this energy efficiency stuff is stuff we would like to hear at the application stage, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, or that they're evaluating it. I don't know if they have to be like, we will save 8 gallons per hour.
Well, I don't know if they're gonna save anything. I think
Yeah.
it's more gonna be a matter of how much are you using and trying to figure
Right.
that out. But like, I think it's a worthwhile topic to discuss at that hearing.
Well, maybe there's ways that they can take their waste and reuse it in a way that it uses heating or something, like there's,
Or like Jim said, there's ways we can prompt them by encouraging them to use different lights or whatever, like
Right.
that.
Have a glass ceiling so it's just sunlight
Right.
coming through and
Yeah.
they don't
And the
need
that
spotter
doesn't
plane.
cost anything.
The spotter planes can find it.
So
So do we just wanna say they submit this with the application?
I think so. I mean, really, it's difficult. Yeah, I'm all in on it.
And we're gonna call it an energy efficiency plan? Is it instead of our operation and management plan? Is that what we're discussing?
We could.
Yeah, or energy use plan?
Energy use plan.
I like that.
Energy use, yeah, that sounds
All right.
better.
Energy use plan, instead of operation and management plan.
Let's see if we can make
Okay.
it to the next page.
Really? Because once I go forward, I can't go back.
We're good with that. So
Ready
far,
to
it
go.
sounds
Don't wanna
good to
go
me.
back.
And this
Okay.
is all gonna have to go through additional hearings after this.
Oh,
anyway,
absolutely.
Yes,
so
multiple
Right.
stages.
That stage, it's
Yeah.
not the worst thing.
Well, and it's probably easier to cut things like that out than to try to get something
Exactly.
added in at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one is a marijuana establishment may only be involved in the use permitted by its definition. Retail marijuana establishments may only be located in buildings with other uses, including other types of marijuana establishments, only if the marijuana establishment is separated by full walls from the other use.
That's bizarre.
So
Well, I
you-
think what they're trying to prevent is a yoga studio selling
Right.
cannabis.
Or is this like the building that we just had up here where it's a building with 3 individual things in it, like you've got the Chamber of Commerce and you've got the
I don't-
bakery in the same
But those are
building?
Yeah.
those are separated by full walls.
I don't
so
agree with
that's
this.
not
I mean, what
But
if
it's
you
the same
want
building, right?
your business to be a yoga marijuana business? What if by nature what you're trying to develop is a multi-use concept?
Right.
Why are
Well, no, I
we-
think
don't
that's
know.
what they're
No,
saying.
no.
They don't want.
They don't
That-
want.
but-
Why?
They
That
don't
doesn't-
want.
I mean, that's creativity, that's artistic, that's exactly what East Hampton's about. Why would we
Gosh.
want to prevent that?
I don't know what the state regs will say about this, to be honest.
Yeah,
I don't like
You know,
well,
I don't know. It's hard. It's like reading a crystal ball.
we probably don't want it. If the state wants it, then we can always go back.
that.
I don't know that it really makes much of a difference.
I think we strike that, or not include that in whatever the state has, and we have to abide by it.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm not a fan of number 2 either.
Totally agree.
I mean, especially where there isn't the issue of on-site consumption, that's the one that deals with like the yoga and the stuff like that,
Oh,
Right.
yes, I mean, maybe.
This is a scenario where you go to a yoga studio, have your class, and buy something to bring home,
Yeah.
which is a
Why
little
can't
bit
you have a
weird.
standalone building? What's the story on that? Why can't you have your own building, let's say? Somebody just builds a building and sells marijuana out of it. Why
Well,
can't they do that?
You could
Oh,
do
you
that
can, I
down-
mean, that's allowed under
I think,
Sam.
so this is poorly worded. It does say at the beginning that it can only be located in building with other uses.
Yeah.
It's a
But what it means is if the marijuana establishment is separated by full walls from the other use.
Okay.
There's that phrase at the end. It's a little poorly phrased.
It's poorly, yeah.
So
It's
you could
basically
build
saying
a
you can
four-wall
have an
building,
establishment in a
and
building
that's
as long
it.
as it's not connected to another building.
Right.
Another-
And if there's another use in there, it has to be
Building,
separated by a full
Yeah.
wall.
Right.
I don't think we need that.
I don't think we need either. It's stupid.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, we can,
The hoochie coochie.
All types of marijuana establishments relative to the cultivation, processing, testing, product manufacturing, public-facing retail, or any other type of state
Oh, I already
licensed
lifted this one.
marijuana.
Move on.
that's gone.
Oh, yeah, we've got that one.
Number
Nice
4.
job, Jess.
That's
Lifted,
gone.
done.
I like
Marijuana
number
establishments
4.
shall not be located in mobile structures.
Yes.
No,
Lifted.
I don't know what that's
Lifted.
about,
Bye-bye.
really.
Food trucks.
No, like a food truck, like a weed
Walter
food
White.
truck?
I actually don't know if I have a problem with the food truck.
Munchies and, you know.
No, we do not want a
gotta-
marijuana. Yeah, let's just have a little tickling thing up and down the streets while we're at it.
I'd love to know what that song is that's on there. All right, moving on.
No.
Oh, so keep that one?
Yeah, we should
Yeah.
have that one. It should not be a mobile structure.
Okay.
I agree.
I tend to agree, but
I
I'm
agree.
I think
I don't know
I'd
why.
rather err on the side of caution on
Yeah.
that one, because I can see
Let the
some
community-
horrible.
Yeah, let's leave it in so it can be discussed in the.
Okay.
That's good.
All
Yeah,
right.
it'd be like ice cream trucks, huh?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying. I don't
skip
want.
All
the
right.
next one because
5
we've
is
already
the
got that
buffer.
figured out.
We did that.
Done.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
What? Oh, comment? Yes?
Could I make a comment on that?
Please.
I've heard of like mobile testing facilities,
Like the mobile poultry processing units.
so
Kind of
someone who
thing,
has
right.
a mobile laboratory could go to the cultivator, test it, whatever they're growing, could go to whatever establishment is selling, so that would be precluded of that, right?
That's not a recreational marijuana establishment though, is it?
It is. But I mean, you could easily say marijuana
I think it's a good
establishments other than testing, marijuana
That's
testing
the solution
facilities
that I like.
shall not be in a mobile structure.
Just what I was thinking.
Other than, I have,
I don't know if you're familiar, there's a bar on wheels. So,
That's just
we're
sound right.
saying, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be ruled out. I mean, I want people to know that that actually exists here.
Where's the bar on
where in
wheels?
Easthampton is there a bar on
We
wheels?
see that advertised. It was advertised near the barber shop, I believe, where the haberdashery.
But they would still need a one-day license and they'd still need to have an area of where people can consume within that
Oh,
mobile
yeah, yeah,
structure.
But they don't have a law that precludes them, which would prevent them. I mean, if this was in the zoning,
But
they
it would
couldn't
still have
do
to go
that.
under a state licensing process, which we don't know whether exists
Yeah,
yet
the
or
state
not.
commission has
Agreed,
that authority.
but this would stop it cold, though, right? Having this language in. I'm asking the question.
I would argue that's not a mobile structure. I mean, if I were trying to get that done, I would argue that that's a one-day license, and you can do that wherever you want, because that's what. they
And
do
one-day
for
licenses
alcohol.
are gonna be allowed under the law. They're,
Right.
there's
It's
gonna
to
be a
addressed
process
by the
for that.
commission.
So it's your belief that having this in would not stop someone from doing this on a one-day?
But, I mean, I don't think that's a mobile structure. I mean, I think that a mobile
right.
structure is something that moves around. I think you can go somewhere and bring stuff, but.
You could,
And
you
park
could
it.
set up a catering event anywhere,
Right.
and you can
And
have
get
a
a
one-day
one-day liquor
license, and you can
license.
still have a one-day license under the law. It just couldn't be served out of a food truck-like thing, I guess.
Right.
A one-day cannabis license.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
discussed
I mean,
in
as
the
part of
state
the law,
law.
they're discussing it, having
Yeah.
one-day
And we don't have
cannabis
regs for it
licenses.
or
Caused me
anything
to
like-
question it, but I trust your loyally.
I'm just
Yoda-
saying what my argument would be.
Yoda
I
ways.
think that there would definitely be debate about that.
So I could.
Well,
I am
what,
questioning.
what went on up in Amherst when they had that, they used to have that thing every year up there, right? On the
Extravaganza.
common.
They do it in Northampton now.
Well, I know
Yeah.
that, but they had it in Amherst,
They
right in
did it
center of
in
Amherst at
Amherst
one
for a
time,
while,
didn't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That was a one-day thing.
yeah.
It is.
As long as that has the ability
I
to
like the
to
way you
function,
smiled at
I'm
that.
okay with it.
I mean, we don't know, I mean, the other thing is we don't yet know what the one-day license process will be. It says it will be governed by the commission, but the commission could say,
I
we're
smiled
not
at
doing
it,
this,
too.
right? I mean, we don't have, that's one of the things we're waiting for. So it may be something that we're sort of thinking
Again,
about.
this is, again, it's not set in stone,
Yeah,
so I
it's
think if the
fluid.
regs come out and say,
Can I just ask
sure,
one?
yeah.
And I'm stepping on you, and I apologize.
No,
about
no.
that, But I'm framing it the wrong way in my mind. What is a really bad case scenario for mobile structures that we're trying to avoid?
From my point of view, going up and down neighborhood streets at 5 miles an
Speed
hour.
dump
with a
trucks.
Well, in residential areas.
Yes.
Well,
Fire
or,
I'm with you.
I mean, my concern even other than that would be the fact that, we're gonna go through a huge
No.
process here with parking and lines and crowds and security, and
Right.
you can't do any of that with a food truck,
Okay.
right? So like, those are the two things I would be concerned about.
I say we leave it in, we lift it, and then it can
And
be
we-
discussed further and
Yeah,
further.
yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
good.
Keep all the avenues open.
Thank you for
Right.
helping me frame that, that helped me.
I hadn't even thought of that, that's fascinating. The
The
mobile.
Cheech and Chong delivery service.
We are all gonna retire off our recreational marijuana business ideas.
Good
from this
question.
area.
Actually, I just wanted to remind folks that delivery in mobile vehicles is currently allowed under the medical marijuana law, so it's already being implemented.
Yeah, I know.
Delivery.
Yeah, we know that.
That's
Yeah.
delivery is different than being a marijuana establishment. The
Right.
establishments have a very specific definition of being
Yeah.
a retail facility, a cultivator.
So I would say lift it, but add in the bit that Jesse said about
My comment.
testing.
Yep.
Yeah.
But can I ask, so are testing facilities, is that actually the location? Because this is, marijuana establishments shall be located, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm getting into semantics, shall be
Can we-
located in mobile structures.
Can we look into this testing facilities thing a little bit? Let's add it in there, but
Yeah.
I would like to do a little bit more research on
Yeah.
that and understand it more as a
Okay.
business.
Sounds.
But we'll leave it in there.
Because the
Okay.
way that reads, it reads to me that it's like the primary
Motor
business.
pipe trucks.
That's-
It'd be so wonderful if we could get someone who was in that industry to show up.
Oh, no.
Okay. All right, so moving on to number
Moving
6.
on.
All right. I'm not sure what this is getting at. Marijuana establishments shall at the minimum meet the requirements imposed on registered marijuana dispensaries for storage. I guess that's RMDs under the medical.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't understand that one either.
yeah.
Really?
I have no idea.
Ditch it.
Yeah.
I
just-
think so.
Number 7.
Let's keep it simple. I like number 7.
7, no order for marijuana cultivation, processing, manufacturing, or retail may be noxious or cause a public nuisance.
Although, how do
That's
you
good.
regulate that?
Well, that's the,
They just
my,
have definitions.
yeah, that's my question. I feel like I've seen something, and it could be in this huge file,
I think to
about
start,
odor,
Well, there was one, and I can't remember.
was it one of the examples?
No.
There was like,
In the state medical regs, you couldn't have any like perceptible odor at all.
So this one, I don't know what this marijuana businesses, chapter 20.884. I don't know what.
oh, right, this is where I saw it, sorry.
Yep,
Go ahead.
exactly.
No.
The same one I'm looking at.
Is the Washington one?
I guess so. I didn't have a.
Vancouver,
Yeah.
Washington, so, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Chris.
No, that's fine.
Go ahead.
So it says nuisance declared. The city of Vancouver finds that production or processing of marijuana or marijuana-infused products or storage or growing of plants in residences, this is residences though, that can be readily seen or normal unaided vision or readily smelled from a public place or private residence shall constitute a nuisance.
So go up one to J for the
J,
previous section.
Marijuana businesses shall incorporate odor control technologies and provisions and ensure that emissions do not exceed the Southwest Washington Clean Air Agency regulations.
Which doesn't apply to us, but
But
at
we
least
would
there's
have
some standard,
Massachusetts
there's
regs.
some
Oh, I would
clean air
love
regs.
that if we had a standard that we could
I'm
utilize.
sure there's a
We
state
could-
clean
Yeah.
air standard, I just don't know what the
Yeah,
CMR
there
would be.
is.
Yeah.
So I would say lift that section and replace it with whatever's the best standard we
Whatever
can come up with.
CMR, yeah, is for the
Clean
Clean
Air
Air.
Standard.
It's, every state has their own Clean Air Act. It's part of it.
And the definition, do you want the one before or after about nuisance declared, that
We'd have to reword it,
if
but-
you can smell it, it constitutes a nuisance for enforcement purposes?
So weird, because people have such different noses.
I know,
I want to be really careful about that. I
Yeah.
like just the first part.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
So we'll modify 7 to reference what a
I'll figure something out.
odor, what a nuisance is.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, number 8, no retail marijuana establishment shall be managed by any person other than the licensee or their assign. Such licensee or assign shall be on the premises during regular hours of operation and responsible for all activities within the licensed business and shall provide emergency contact information for the Salem Police Department to have on file.
that don't sound right.
We're basically saying our police and fire department need to know who's in charge, and that person needs to be on premises when the place is opened. Is that what's being said?
Yeah, so our medical zoning requires that there's like 2 people that have 24-hour contact information for police and fire and city
Right.
officials, and that you notify them if there's any violation, and that you're available to give them access at any time of the day or night.
Lift that.
I mean, I think that maybe we want to just use that language.
Yeah, lift that.
Yeah, from the, I agree.
We'll just use that.
And
Yep.
we're talking about our existing medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Yeah, just use that.
Lift
Okay.
Okay. 9, all waste disposal shall at minimum meet the requirements imposed on registered marijuana dispensaries for disposal to prevent exposure to the public or create a nuisance.
Can we scroll down just a tad, please, Jessica?
Oh, sorry,
No,
I'm,
no need to be sorry.
So this again is incorporating the disposal regs for medical, which are the state regs.
I think that's already covered.
it's gonna be covered
I
under
mean,
the
it'll be
special
covered.
permit anyway.
Yeah,
You
it's
have a
already
covered.
requirement for waste disposal.
I agree.
Okay.
Well, and
Forget
it's,
about it.
and it's likely gonna be covered in the state regs, so
As
us
well.
incorporating that doesn't
Yep.
really.
Okay, so don't do that.
10, the marijuana establishment shall remove all material, plants, equipment upon and any other retail marijuana establishment items ceasing its operation. So that's kind of like the solar panel, like the wind down thing.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
the decommissioning.
Yeah,
I think that's a good one.
and that's something I haven't given any
And nor
thought
have
to.
I.
Nope,
Because a retail shop isn't necessarily a problem, but if you, I mean, like that medical place has a ton of stuff, like the existing, like a huge operation, like I don't know.
All equipment, though?
I mean, there's money in that, there's
Upon
no
its
way.
cease of
Unless they
operation.
sold it to another company that,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
know,
you
I
should
don't
have to
know.
get ready for lights and beds, because another company might want to come in. I think the concept here is really you're not looking for plant material. You know, because
Right.
if someone comes in, then they have to inherit the responsibility of cleaning because you left it behind, or a landlord.
I think
and
that's right.
That's
And-
maybe,
and I'm,
Yeah.
I'm maybe making a huge jump here, but without understanding the manufacturing processes and making sure that it doesn't end up being a brownfield of any
Right.
sort. I don't think that's possible, but I'm just,
Well,
I'm just-
also, I mean,
Maybe
if
we
you,
should buy
if you
green
bought that
green
building and
green.
showed up, you could conceivably still be getting criminal penalties for possessing
True.
excessive quantities of marijuana beyond
Yep.
what you're allowed to have. But the problem is, this is the end of the permitting process, so like, we have
who's
no
gonna
teeth.
enforce that?
Well, how? I mean,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do, revoke their special permit?
Right.
They've shut down and moved on.
You're
Right, so
right.
with the solar, there's a
Yeah.
decommissioning plan that they have to submit, that the board approves, and that's kept
And
in the
surety.
file, and surety and a
Right.
bond, and we're not doing
That, we're not, this is not something
You
that
could do that
warrants
on a
that.
special permit anyway if you really
Right.
felt, if
Right.
you really needed to.
Yes.
And it
The
war-
language
it-
is in there.
Agreed.
It's much
And
more
since we
important in a
decided it's all
solar
special
field
permit.
because it's giant concrete slabs in the middle of a field
Strike it.
that you can leave. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think we need that.
Okay.
All right.
Isn't this great?
It's fantastic
Yay.
progress.
We could always
Um,
get the health inspector involved in it, couldn't we?
That's
Yep.
true as well.
Oh,
all
yeah.
business signage shall be subject to requirements. Okay, so that leads us to our next section on signage, which we haven't
Mhm.
gotten to, but,
I think
I
you
mean,
need to
we
put
need
it
a
in
s-
there.
We need a reference to the signage.
I think you need to put that in
Yeah.
there.
Right.
I
Fine.
agree.
Okay.
That language
We don't
is
know what
fine.
it'll say yet, but,
But I think
Same
you
thing,
need to put it in
except
there.
that we use our sections instead of theirs.
right. 12, no marijuana shall be smoked, eaten, or otherwise consumed or ingested within any type of licensed marijuana establishment.
I don't know. I think that if we don't take the wherewithal to pass some kind of social consumption thing in advance, I think that it's highly likely that a ballot initiative will come forward in this community. I've already heard from a lot of individuals that whether or not that'll pass, I can't say. But I think it's a mistake to put that language in.
Well, if we pass a ballot initiative, it would change the ordinance, though. I mean, it would
Right.
supersede that.
It would have to add that in, changing the language. I don't think why we should put that in. In fact, I think we should do the opposite and plan for having those businesses. Because I don't agree with the premise that a ballot initiative is required. I heard from Mr. Hoffman directly at the gentleman on the Cannabis Control Commission, and he told me he doesn't believe it's required, that we have the ability to.
But that's one guy of a CC, of a
Of the
eight-panel
CCC.
CCC, you
That is
know?
one
I
guy of
can't,
the
I can't take the
CCC.
opinion of one
I
guy
mean,
on the
I think-
CCC.
You know,
They have to
I
come to
think we can
consensus
do
and
it.
put it
I
in
mean, I
writing.
think
my
if the
opinion.
ballot initiative passes, that's different, but I don't know.
I don't think we require the ballot initiative. That's if we don't do it. That's the vehicle for the community to bypass us when we're not cooperating.
What's the liability with having because I mean when I was in Denver, they wouldn't allow.
No other
anything
state allows it.
consumed. And they was very strict. Like if they would lose their license if anyone
Right.
was consuming on site.
Hmm.
What is the liability with marijuana being consumed on premises? Is there potential for suing the establishment if someone trips because they're stoned?
I think you would have the same sort of liability that bars and liquor stores do, where you're on the hook for that.
What if you added that 12, but put at the end, that is not a licensed social consumption establishment?
No. It's you. Still
Because that
wouldn't
allows
matter
for us
whether
to
it's
figure that out
licensed
later,
or
but no one
unlicensed.
else can.
But if we pass a ballot initiative, then it immediately supersedes the language in the bylaw anyway.
Right.
So it will
No,
just.
it's-
For social establishments, but it
Right.
won't, for those that don't have the social consumption license, they still won't have the ability, which I think is that's what that's trying to accomplish. And your comment about, you know, you're not supposed to consume if you don't have the right license, I mean, that's sort of the point of having this in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not if you don't, I mean, I don't think there's any other states that allow social consumption.
Right.
No, it's
Anywhere.
not. I mean, the only place I've seen it is in Amsterdam.
Right. But so, I mean, I think if you had this language here in 10, and then you passed a ballot question that said, in these locations, in these businesses, you can consume on site, it would supersede it would be the exception to this. It's not like
Right.
that's invalidated because this is in existence.
Yeah, but I just warn you, we're gonna get hung up on this. I don't think we should be putting this language in there. I strongly don't. I think we should do the opposite and plan on putting it in and make social consumption happen here in Easthampton.
So we would be the landmark.
I think we're the
community in
ones.
the United States of
I
America.
think we're the ones.
I would say that, I mean, I personally don't think it's a smart idea, but I certainly don't think it's something that the planning board has any right to do. I mean,
Well, we have the
you
right
know,
to put the zoning in and then send it to the ordinance and have them either go what or
So,
yeah.
can I just jump in here for a second, and maybe the recommendation is we don't address it at all and leave it blank?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
And then
I
that
wouldn't
way,
touch it.
when the CCC comes down with their regs, I mean, I've got some very draft recommendations that have, from the Cannabis Industry Subcommittee that's talking about social consumption, and the things that they're talking about are limits on potency, limits on purchases, limits on serving size, having a tiered system of different types of consumption.
mhm.
So, you know, different regulatory licenses that you will need for these different types of on-site consumption. Maybe it's not even worth addressing at the local level to some extent, because the state is gonna
And
come
wait
out
for
with
the
a
state
whole thick section about on-site consumption and what can happen and what they need to do in order to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be the
I
other,
think that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we wait and either do a ballot initiative or do whatever the state allows us to do at that point.
It's clear we're in a stalemate otherwise. There is a
Can
question.
I just offer a different perspective, because this is something I've actually been studying on a level for my business, because I'm planning on applying before you guys for social consumption as well. So I just came back from Colorado as well, and I've looked at a number of cities and towns out there, and Colorado Springs actually has, the town has zoned for on-site social consumption ahead of that initiative 300, which just passed. So they're a good example and a precedent of a municipality that took the initiative. They also chose on their side not to have recreational marijuana. So they have medical marijuana and they have social consumption. They have the only legal example I could find in current existence of a socially licensed marijuana consumption club. So, I mean, there is precedent as well for that.
So is it only for medical?
So you can only, in the limits of Colorado Springs, you can only purchase medical marijuana. In this example, it's the Speakeasy Vape Club, a new cannabis club, and they do not have a retail license. So, but you can consume inside.
But you can only consume medical because recreational isn't legal?
You can bring your own recreational. For them, they have bring your own. So those
Oh,
are
so it's
differences for
legal
recs.
recreationally, but not
You can't
retail?
buy recreation.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
they're not selling,
Okay.
but they have like a license issued from the state of, the municipality of Colorado Springs for social consumption.
but the way that the Massachusetts law is currently written is that you can only consume in places where you
Where
can-
you've bought it.
where you can buy it.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna be,
And
it's not
where you
gonna
have
happen
bought
where
it,
you
it's
have.
not just where you can buy it, but the marijuana that you have purchased there.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the way that the law is currently written, so we're not gonna have
All right,
a-
let's leave that out for now, and we can,
I think we can, and when we come to the point where we're having joint meetings, I'm definitely gonna be bringing it up and pushing it, so ready yourselves.
all right.
Yeah.
13, hours of operation for marijuana retailers shall be consistent with those of package stores licensed under MGL Chapter 138.
This is for those with package stores,
Hmm.
hours of operation for package stores. But do we have,
don't
package
know that
store
that's-
hours
Yes.
in our licensing?
Well,
Well,
it's
it's by
Mass General
state.
law,
A Mass
so-
General, of course, yeah.
Yes, general.
I'm not sure that, I mean, I think those may be more restrictive than,
Yeah, because what about like a manufactory that has to be operating? You need someone on the late shift, you know.
well, this is only marijuana retailers.
Okay, a retailer, got it.
So
What
it's
if they
just
do
the
if they need
retailer.
a
Thank you
nip
for
of
correcting.
Jack Daniels? They wait till tomorrow.
Right,
You know what, retailers is more, I think that's more reasonable.
I'm fine with that.
okay. Let's
Keep
put it
it?
in there for now.
You don't need me to pull it up?
Nope.
Okay.
Nah.
Yeah, it's
Deliveries of products to and from retail marijuana establishments shall comply with the hours set forth in the Code of Ordinances. I have no idea what that's referencing. I don't think we have any restrictions on when and how people make deliveries. It's just something that we'll discuss as part of the application process.
That's fine, so we can strike that one.
strike it, yeah.
All right, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it, really.
Okay. Can we just jump to outside Salem and go to Washington State for a moment?
Yep.
Is that Renton, Washington one?
Or is it that chapter 28841?
It's the chapter 20.884. It's Vancouver.
Vancouver, Washington, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there too.
Hopefully my highlights will have popped up. Okay, so I just noted that they have the 300 feet.
Ours is 250 right now, is that right?
Ours is 200.
200. From any other state licensed so we had 200 from schools, but we were also saying 200 from other state licensed marijuana.
No, we have none.
We have none at all.
We didn't buffer between,
Between facilities.
That's what I was wondering, if we had a buffer between facilities. That's what this first item B is.
Oh, maybe that's why.
right.
Competition
You have
takes
to-
care of that.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, does competition, like, if three marijuana establishments, you know, at 33, 35, and 37 Main Street, 3 different companies, do we really want that to happen? Do we really want that many people in that
I mean, I
dense
guess,
of an area?
I think it's worth talking about.
Well, that's downtown business, so that's gonna be special permit as we just decided.
Right, which then allows us to say no, right? Is
No,
that-
but
I
you
mean-
can't,
Not
you
for that
can't,
reason,
not
yeah.
for that reason.
I mean, I'm
You can
curious
say no
though-
because they haven't met one of the criteria for a special permit. You can't say no just because.
We already
you feel
have
like
one.
it.
Side.
Otherwise they'll
Yeah,
sue us.
you can't, yeah.
It's, it,
Welcome to court.
it is, it's
That's why we've got
interesting because
18
I
nail
don't think
salons in this town.
I don't think we've seen a bylaw that doesn't do that.
So,
But and I know like in a bigger city, there's always this concern about like, you're gonna end up with a pot district or something like that. And it's usually said like with a scary voice and ominous overtone,
Right.
but like, I think first of all, end up with that in the downtown business simply by the fact that it's a very limited window where
Yeah, it's
once we
real
put
small.
our other buffers in.
it's where
and-
we're going to put these, so.
And so like, I don't know that it's really gonna,
We need a dense section.
but we don't have any, I don't think we've seen any that don't have that buffer between businesses, so I don't know. I mean, we already gone through this, so I don't know that we need to go
Well,
back over it, but it
The
is something
other,
that we should.
the other piece is that under the law, there's a requirement for facilities to have the agreement with the municipality.
Right.
Why am I spacing?
The host
out?
city.
The host
The host,
agreement.
yeah.
Goodness gracious.
That's up to 5
Um,
years.
Now, I know that our
3%.
current administration is not in support of setting a limit of the buffer distance between those facilities and other facilities. There are some that do, there's some communities that do have that, or some host agreements that do have that. But I'm unclear on whether that's gonna be allowed under the recreational. These are more of the medical marijuana host agreements that are being negotiated. But if the current mayor wanted to accept a host agreement that limited that buffer distance, because they're protecting their own business, you know, they don't want competition, so.
Something that could be added on, it's an incentive.
Well, I'm just saying that
It also
it could be, it could happen outside of the zoning, so you put this in here, and then there's a host agreement that's
Right.
negotiated that totally doesn't jive
And it
with what's
also
in the
could be in
zoning.
the state regs. I mean, the school one was in the medical state regs.
I got a
don't-
little bit of a preview of what those are gonna be.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee, because the draft is coming out in December, it sounds like, by the way, the draft regs are
Yeah.
coming early. But the preview that I got was that you can do up to 3%, up to 5 years, and they added language in from the medical saying that you've got to provide some rationale as to why you're doing it.
Right, there's gotta be a
Right.
nexus between the,
Which they didn't have before, so that's
Mhm.
interesting.
Okay, so let's,
so skip this
I
one.
guess, skip the buffer between businesses.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we just looking at these highlighted ones? Jessica?
Yeah,
Is that
really,
what-
that's I kind of tried to vet the,
Okay.
Stuff that we've talked about and don't
So,
have
home
language on.
occupation.
Use the home occupation, didn't we talk about this?
I don't remember if we had a decision to it or not.
We briefly discussed it, but I don't think we came up with anything.
We
so
allow
let's quickly
residential
talk about
kitchens.
it.
Right.
Why can't you do this at home? I mean, a co-op idea obviously is gonna have growers using the existing growing capabilities that are within the law to then take their materials and bring them to a co-op somehow. Is that not the same as a home occupation? I don't know.
Well, home occupation, we have two different levels of home occupation in the zoning. We have minor and major. So the minor one is for people who don't have people coming to their establishment, they're working solely at home on a computer. The major ones, either they can have employers, they can have people coming to the house to either pick up supplies. So it's got more of a higher standards in terms of looking at it for public health, safety, and welfare to make sure there's no nuisance in terms of traffic and lighting and hours of operation, because it's a residential home in a residential neighborhood. So those go through the ZBA as it is now. So if somebody was proposing a home occupation for a marijuana business, the permitting would be a little tricky, because they would end up having to go to the ZBA, and they would have to, I presume, come to the planning board for the marijuana piece of it. I'm just
I don't
like
even know how you
rattling.
would be
I'm
able to
not-
meet all the other requirements with a
Yeah.
home occupation, because we've talked about like ventilation, security, like all of these things.
Yeah,
like
testing
Right.
and quality control, and there'd be so much.
Well, and didn't we say that you couldn't have it in a building that also had residents, or was that the state that says I thought there was already, maybe I'm looking at a different statute.
Okay.
I thought that it was
don't
precluded in
remember.
buildings that have,
I see the same
Residential.
thing
That's
tripping me up,
that's
but what
medical.
concerns me is we already have in the law, and people are already doing it throughout the community, the grows,
Right.
ventilation and all the
But
other
they
stuff.
can do a home grow that
Home
falls
grow.
under the home grow. This is a home occupation where they're home grow, and then they've got people
And then
coming to
they-
the house to pick up
And
product.
I agree, that trips
Yeah.
me off too, kind of, you've described sort of a minor and a major, and the
Yeah.
major for me is the trip up where people are coming, but the minor seems to fit perfectly into my vision, there may be different visions, of what a co-op could potentially do, where those individuals that are doing that might be able to take some of what they've done and bring them to someone that's going to brand and label it through a distribution facility. And I just want to make sure that in what we're doing, that we don't prevent that simple, that you don't put language in that cuts that possibility out,
I can see that minor part.
just the minor.
Yeah.
so the medical, our medical zoning says an RMD or OMMD facility shall not be located within a building containing residential units except mixed-use buildings.
Mixed-use
So the medical, I mean, it's obviously on a different kind of scale than what we're talking about with like the co-op or the craft co-op or something, but I just don't know how you would.
In general, though, I
Any of
think it's
those.
important language to put in. I don't want these businesses popping up residential all over the place.
Right.
I agree with the premise of it. I just want to make sure.
So would we say marijuana businesses are not permitted as a major home occupation?
That works for me.
And we'll have to then define minor and major.
Well, they are, and I can
Pull
cross-reference
those
it
definitions
to,
in.
per section, blah, 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 the home occupation
Perfect.
ordinance of the, blah, blah, blah.
I like
Yep,
that.
yep, yep,
Blah,
Okay.
blah, blah.
Yeah.
I got it
Yeah,
from the
yeah,
state
yeah,
regs
yeah.
are gonna say no to that, but maybe there's a way around it. We'll see.
Okay, so not permitted as a major home occupation, okay?
Oh, and F is that same
That same thing.
Salem language. They clearly stole this one from there.
Oh, look at that.
We'll skip it this time too.
Why not?
And there's that mobile structure
And mobile
again.
structures.
They love that, don't they?
Now they get pretty specific.
So then the hours of operation,
Signage,
signage,
fully enclosed.
enclosed.
They've got a limit.
I do like, back to signage, I do like no off-site, no off-premises signage.
Well, I think you're
is
gonna,
permitted.
you gotta deal with that under the
We're
sign
gonna get into
ordinance.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gotta be for everybody,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
although we did discuss that, I think that what you have to have is you have to have a compelling reason for any sort of content-based restriction. So I think that like alcohol and tobacco and marijuana may be the kinds of things that you can
Could
try
be.
to get into that, but I think we can deal with that in the signage stuff. And then G is a new one. Marijuana plants, products, and paraphernalia shall
crap.
not be visible from outside the building in which the marijuana business is located.
Right.
Well, that's the mobile structure. Oh, gee, oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Yeah,
down on
no,
the next
I'm not
G.
gonna, I'll just wait for you to catch up.
You're on another G.
Got a hand in the back.
Oh, yes.
One item that wasn't highlighted was item D, which stipulated the number of businesses.
Jess, we're gonna need you to go back, sorry.
All right.
No more than 12 retail marijuana businesses shall be allowed within the city.
Correct. Are you gonna run with, I mean, A, is that something you wanna consider, or B, do you run into the same issues with concerns about litigation by limiting?
Well, the statute allows us to limit based on the number of retail liquor licenses.
It's, yeah,
in
so.
the community.
Yep,
I
so
think
it's-
when we discussed this before, we determined that because of the buffering in the areas that it's not likely that that's going to be an issue, but we didn't really come down on that.
So the numbers are that in the city, we have 4 all alcohol package stores. We have 4 that are just wine and malt, a total of 8. So the law allows to limit the number of it's just retailers, to fewer than 20% of the number of licenses issued within the town for not to be drunk on the premises. But the question was, under that issued, whether that means authorized by the state of what we're permitted to have or
above
over
quota
quota.
ones.
And so that's the unclear part. Now, I think most of the over quotas are for restaurants, they're not for package stores, but I don't know the answer if that's true or not. So that's part of the question with that state language right now.
I mean,
So it would limit it to 2 retailers in the entire city if you did the 20%.
I mean, clearly that's a no for me, yeah.
but we can limit it to something other than that. We can't go below 20.
You can't go below
Yes,
20,
that's
right? So you could do 50,
Right.
you could limit it to 4.
Or you could limit it to 8, or you could limit it to 12. I mean, you can set the limit at anything, you just can't drop below the 2.
That's
I
right.
don't think we want to drop below the 2, that.
But what about, I mean, this gets into that, what if you're then a minor home occupation? And what if we have hundreds of people that happen to be growing in their home?
Right.
Have we just put them out because now they're tripped up on this? I see a need, somewhere out there's a fear that Easthampton is going to become Hampton. I'm not necessarily hating that, but regardless, I don't think anyone really wants it. But I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't. I think that's a fallacious argument. I don't think it's necessary to put that in there at all. I think competition handles the problem.
If we wanted to limit the number to fewer than the number of medical, that also has to go through a ballot initiative. So if you want to do it fewer than 20, it has to be through a ballot initiative, the majority of the voters. If you want to prohibit the operation of 1 or more types, it's the ballot.
Right.
And then if you want to limit the number of establishments to fewer than the number of centers, which
I mean,
we only have 1, but we're going to have more.
I would simply pair it with the retail alcohol idea that, like, if you're capping that at 8, you would cap this at 8. That seems compelling
That
to me,
seems
but
reasonable.
I don't know that we need to deal with that. I also think that's probably something that's going to come up at ordinance and at the city council level. So I don't know that it particularly
Do you want to put in
matters.
language and leave the number blank and just leave and let it just be part of the discussion?
Put it in and make it 20.
I think so.
Well, no, I think Jesse makes a good point that if there's a state limit on the number of package stores in a community based on whatever their requirements are, then, why, and if we're making it if you're making that
As long as you're very
comparison.
specific that you're talking about places where people can go in and come out with the product, and not places where, it's the minor home or it's testing.
Oh, yeah,
As
yeah,
long
yeah.
as it's being
This says
very-
retail.
Well, but so I
This
kind
is
of
only
like
for
Jessica's
retail.
idea here, though. What if we simply said it no more than blank retail marijuana and left that for the
The problem I
to
have
flag
with
it?
blank is that gives the possibility for it to come in at 2.
Why
I
don't
don't
you
wanna
just,
feed
why
it
don't you
more.
say 8, because that's the number of package stores, and we make a comment, I make a little comment box saying 8.
I'll take your 8 and make
For
it 16.
discussion.
Can we make it that it's the same amount as the alcohol establishment? So as you will allow more, if you
Package.
do allow more package stores, then you will also allow then more marijuana?
I like that.
That's interesting.
That's it, yeah.
So
Happy
So
medium.
there should be
that's
no more
really
retail
simple.
marijuana businesses than retail alcohol businesses within the city.
Right.
Okay, do that again. There'll be no more than,
No more retail marijuana businesses than retail alcohol businesses allowed within the city.
how about we call it,
Okay.
1 second.
retail, why don't we say about the not to be drunk on the premises? Do you want to do
Yeah,
that?
let's specify it that way. Well,
Well, no.
Oh, then you're alone.
no more than the retail, than the number of retail,
Whatever that statute language defined it as.
well, it says not to be drunk on the premises, so that means package stores.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean restaurants, that doesn't mean,
Right.
that's package stores.
So
Which we have 4, is that what
We have
said?
8.
8.
Sorry, 8.
8.
But Chris's version of this language allows that to go up with,
More
Any
licenses,
additional
right.
package stores.
I don't think we're gonna have less package stores. I mean, you think if a package store goes out of this town, there'll be another one right in its place.
Yeah, I just, we fill up, we have 8, we have need for more, and they have to wait for a new package store to go
Well,
into
we
town
have
to
need
get to
for
9.
Do we
It's
need more
weird.
than 8?
Well, we got none now. Do you think 8's enough, for God's sake?
Yeah, that's a lot,
But in
Jim,
the
honestly.
interest
Well,
of-
also
I mean,
in the
people
interest
say
of
there's
moving
too
forward-
many package stores in
interest of
town, to
moving
be
forward,
honest, so.
It can be debated
Kind of
later.
okay with 8.
Yeah, okay.
Well, also, it wouldn't be a state license the way alcohol would be, where we'd have to go to the legislature. It would simply be a zoning reg that we could amend if we thought we needed our ninth one.
I'm on board with
Right.
that.
Hold on, we have one comment on this one.
Right,
I
and
just have a reluctance
if we
to
add another
equate
package store,
marijuana usage with alcohol consumption, so I don't really like the idea personally of saying that a retailer for cannabis is the same effect on the community as a retailer for liquor. I don't feel that way, and so I am hesitant to just make a broad swipe and say numbers are numbers. I
In my-
just wanted to
That's
note
valid.
that.
And my fear is that we're not thinking about all the potential kinds of retailers there are, and there may be such a broad range of creativity out there that there may in fact be hundreds of types and not at all have the same kinds of effects that we could, and by locking this in that way, we're putting ourselves in a position where
I-
we're losing that
I think
creativity.
as a draft, we put it in there and highlight it and leave
Yeah.
it as up for discussion,
good with
because
that.
honestly, I think
Good
this
with
is gonna be a topic that is gonna be
I
a
think
hot
it's gonna
topic
come
in the
either way.
discussion.
Round and
And for the
round.
planning board to not even acknowledge it and
Great
put it in
to
there, I think
Something
is,
they're
you
trying
know, that you,
I feel the same.
yes,
Okay.
I think put it in there, highlight it as
They're gonna
to
go-
be
they're gonna
discussed.
get
Okay, then,
Thanks for
I like
pointing
that
that out.
idea. Do we then go back and put that same thing
I-
about the number of feet
yes.
between
Yes, oh, the number of,
buffer
feet-
between
buffer between
businesses?
businesses, and leave it open with a highlight or something? Just
We
so we
can
can
do
say we
that.
thought we discussed it, and we couldn't come up with a decision, so fix it.
Yeah.
yep,
I think that's worth flagging for discussion.
I feel the same. I'd like to see that number at 100 foot in our temporary line item.
again, I can leave the number blank.
Yeah, leave the number blank. I don't
Less?
think,
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, what were you thinking?
Well, 100's
50?
what? 100's
50?
what's the storefront? 50
Well, you
feet?
have 200 feet from the schools, so why not keep it consistent?
Well, if a
In downtown
storefront is,
business-
say, what, 50 foot, probably less, say, like, what's,
How big is the storefront? Well,
Yeah,
let's
how
look,
big
hold
is-
on, well, wait, we've got
Why
that
don't we just leave
application
that
that was
number
just in
blank?
front of us, hold
Right,
on,
but
with
flag
the
it
site
for
plan.
discussion.
Want it to come
Wait,
out of the 1,000.
wait,
Fair
wait.
enough.
it would
We have a site plan in front of us, oh, they don't have measurements.
I want as much of our homework done as
I was being so
possible.
smart.
So that people know we thought about
It
this.
can't be more
well,
than-
that's why I like including it, because I don't
25.
like to, I like to have something there to show that we've discussed this and thought it through.
I agree, I just don't want any blanks. I want, we thought it through and this is what we recommend.
Okay, so just as a point of reference, so 33.5, 35 Union Street, both of them combined together,
Yes.
this doesn't seem right. 32 feet?
That's
I'm not
it?
surprised by that,
Really?
actually. Yeah, that,
Because
well, the
that's
first one's
almost
just
like,
a door.
yeah, that's almost like one storefront.
So that's
It's a tiny
32
building.
feet as a point of reference.
So you like 100, Jim, for a
No,
point of
32.
discussion?
Yeah, I regret my earlier statement. I categorically refute.
Want to say 50?
I think 50 is
Let's put 50 in
reasonable.
there, it's
Sounds
a
good.
starting
Because
point
if
for
you do
discussion.
50, then that would
50.
prohibit them from being right
Next to
next
each
to
other,
one
right.
another, but they could be,
They can just
One
store in
staggered.
between.
it'd be like
Love
skip
it.
A
one.
little bit of a stagger, I like that idea.
Okay, 50.
That's not bad. Yep.
Talk about staggering.
Question about a possible use, so if someone had a business selling, growing equipment, would they be allowed to have a live plant in their facility, or would that be in violation of whatever? Even though
Probably
it's
in
not being grown
violation.
to sell?
I don't think you need the same kind of licensing for growing equipment. People sell growing equipment right now
Right now.
and don't, yeah, the hydroponic stores, and they don't have any kind of,
Yeah.
they don't
I
have
think
to go
if
through
once
any
you
of
put a
that.
live plant in there, Marty, you're changing, it
You're in
changes.
violation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
That'd be my
Being
thought.
And you couldn't have one, say, a cafe is a potted plant,
You know what? I think there's gonna be some fascinating cases about this stuff.
I mean,
I
there
love
could
the
be,
entire
there
of
could
it.
be a business that
You
just
know,
sells plants. I mean, it
I
could
can
be,
see
it could
that
be a store
happening.
where they're just selling the plants and
Who would
people,
identify?
they're selling clones,
Right.
and maybe they're not using it for the cannabis itself, maybe they're juicing the leaves. I mean, there's other things that you
came
can
up at our
do
seminar,
with
the
the
idea of
plant,
like
so.
a garden store
Yeah,
that's
Garden
selling
center.
plants.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Is there someone else back there with a hand up? Did you have a question?
Well, actually, the question I was gonna ask is because this is my first time before the planning board when you had public comment, so I've been watching, and do you have it at the end, because you need to work, I understand, it's a working session.
We're a little free form
But do
today.
you have something at the end of it, or?
Well, so this
No.
is a little bit more free-form and
Yeah,
loosey-goosey
I've
than it
been
should be, to
relaxed.
be honest, and people should be
Because
stating
no
their,
one's identifying themselves for the record.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree. I've been thinking about this.
Duly noted. Well,
You're right, although part of the reason we're doing that is everyone here has spoken many times, but that's no excuse. We
Yeah.
really should be bringing
No,
people
everybody
forward.
should be identifying themselves.
And I believe
So
you
who are-
submitted a letter, you submitted a letter
who are
for
you?
the board. You guys, so I think this gentleman submitted a letter to the board, which was in your folder, and it's
Yep.
from the Easthampton Healthy Youth.
Oh, you're from the Youth Coalition.
would you like to come up now and comment on it?
Well, I mean, I've been watching, it's been very interesting. First, let me introduce myself.
Can you come up to the?
Yeah.
Well, you're right. We've been
Yeah,
skirting
thank
some
you.
of my regular rules here, and I apologize.
We'll go totally by the book. I'm Stephen Linsky, and I'm a volunteer board member for the Healthy Youth Coalition. And just with other things, we also help track, and we think that we help serve the public bodies as they go through things involving the kinds of issues that are before the coalition: alcohol, tobacco, and now marijuana. There was reference earlier to a program last week, was it, or the week before, that, and I do know, because I attended, there were people from the health department, I think they're from Easthampton, so you may want to check with them, because there certainly were people from Easthampton present, and I think they identified themselves from the health, Board of Health. I think. So check on that. The coalition is going to have a program next week at our next coalition meeting on the 29th at the high school, if anyone's interested. Because look, a lot of people are interested. And I appreciate you going through this and trying to figure out good case scenario, bad case scenario, what are the state regs that can come in. So it's all a lot of guesstimations. For our part, we're trying to track what's happening in other places so that we can provide best practices too. And I think that ultimately it will work. It will work out. I will only say that as someone who has sat on similar boards as you, as an observation, it's harder to roll things back than it is to roll things out. So if you are kind of putting out and saying, well, why not this and why not that and why not this, and then you kind of lay it out there, and then you say, oh my goodness, maybe not such a good idea, whatever. It's harder to, it's the proverbial putting toothpaste back in the tube. So I would just say as an observation that maybe by consider it can always incrementally change, but it's harder to change back. And we're all going to see how it goes. I mean, it looks like my sense, and Jessica, maybe you may have, if you have a different one, that there may be presumptive approval given to the, to the medical marijuana ones first. So that may be our test case right there, because they may get presumptive approval, and then we can all see how the retail part of it works, and it might answer a lot of the questions that everyone's speculating about in terms of distances and all those kinds of things. So I think that's the good news in some respects, is that there'll be some kind of test. And then I think that you'll figure out. I do think, my last comment will be this. There was the discussion earlier about whether it should be special permitting or not. And from a process perspective, boy, that is definitely the way to go, because then you can go step by step, and there's nothing that is presumptive. And you'll have an opportunity at each step to approve in accordance, and it'll give you a chance each and every time to really look at it. So I like the thinking that basically, if I understood it, was going to take out site plan approval and just leave it at the special permitting for everything, because I think that will just give you us collectively the opportunity to work our way through as it goes on. But in any event, I just wanted to tell you that that we would love to be of help and give whatever information as we kind of shared in the letter. We'll be participating, and if anyone comes on the 29th, that would be great. to see you there.
Great.
Thank
What
you.
time-
Thank you very
what
much.
time on the 29th? What time?
Oh, what time is
What
that?
time is that?
I think we're gonna start. I think we're gonna start at 5:30, because I think we'll have maybe some food and daycare for people who wanna settle in there.
Yeah.
And it's at the high school?
It's gonna be at the high school.
On the 28th or 29th?
Wednesday, the 29th.
29th?
I believe, that's a Wednesday, is it not? I believe it
Yes,
is.
I think so.
The day after my
One
birthday.
second. Yeah,
Yes.
yes, it is.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5:30 's awful early.
And
You're over there.
I will apologize for being too relaxed with our usual policy, but I got carried away.
So can we just get for the record, though, because I
Yeah.
don't know if Amanda has gotten everybody's name, especially these folks here.
I don't know their names off the top of my head, but I know the
Everybody else you've
I know
got.
the other players.
Okay. So your name for the record?
Yes, my name for the record is Rebecca Belofsky, Belofsky.
And your address?
53 Holyoke Street, Unit 1, and you are correct in remembering that I have spoken before.
Yes.
Unit 1.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we've got one more section in this one that was highlighted, Jessica, the no non-conforming uses. So we've got a little farther.
Is it the other way?
Nope, it's the second to last paragraph, so it's all the way.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we didn't hit G. We started talking about marijuana
Oh, you're
plants,
right.
products, and paraphernalia shall not be visible from outside the building in which marijuana business is located. I like that one.
I like that as well.
Which one? Sorry,
Feel
Chris.
good.
G,
letter
visible
G.
from the outside.
Easy.
G. Okay.
G is good.
I think we addressed the security stuff.
Yes. What
J,
else?
marijuana business. We
Um,
talked about J, marijuana.
Order,
We
and
talked
we
about the
discussed the
nuisance.
new.
Non-conforming
No
uses.
non-conforming use. No use that constitutes or purports to be a marijuana producer, marijuana processor, or marijuana retailer, as those terms are defined in this ordinance, that was engaged in that activity prior to the enactment of this ordinance shall be deemed to have been a legally established use under the provisions of the Vancouver Municipal Code, and that use shall not be entitled to claim legal non-conforming status.
Need your help, Jesse?
So
don't
I
know what
think
that
what they're
means at all.
saying is if you were basically illegally growing or selling drugs
You're not
out of your
grandfathered.
business, you can't claim that it was a non-conforming use.
I got it. You're pre-existing.
I don't think that's really gonna, I can't
I don't
imagine
think
anyone's
so
making
either.
that
I just thought it
argument.
was interesting.
It is interesting.
I would love to see the case where
Right.
that happened.
I've been dealing drugs out of this facility for 15 years.
Right.
I'm grandfathered.
Did you ever have a permit for it? No.
hate
Well,
that
then there you go.
grandfather shit.
So under the Massachusetts law, I don't think it'd be a big deal.
All right, so,
Can we, moving on to Q, line Qs?
please.
Partner.
So which one's that, the Pepperell one, Jessica?
Let's see.
Oh,
Pepperell and
Pepperell.
Aspen.
And Aspen.
So Pepperell.
Pepperell's short. That's one page.
Yep.
It's only the highlighted things. And again, this has nothing to do with marijuana. This is like their ATM.
Right.
But what as I did multiple searches for line Qs, that was the only like businesses that were coming up
And food
Right.
carts.
in food carts, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't print this one out because I really don't understand why.
All right, so the Pepperell language says, no loading area shall require vehicles exiting the area to back onto a public way. No loading area shall require vehicles waiting to be offloaded to park in a queue on a public way.
It's more about the second piece than the first piece. I mean, we do have in our parking standards for, for off-street parking, I think we do have regulations that say that that vehicles are not allowed to back into the public way. I think
Yeah.
that language already exists. But it's the second part about requiring vehicles waiting to be offloaded to park in a queue in a public way. So what I don't wanna see is 15 cars sitting on Northampton Street waiting to get into a parking lot.
Right.
That's what I don't wanna see, and that's what I'm concerned with, that the demand is not gonna be, that the demand will be so high and there'll be not enough places to provide that demand, that there will be a huge flux of individuals that are going to these facilities. If it's downtown, it might not be that big of a deal except for a pedestrian queue.
Right.
If we're talking about highway business, you could see a huge traffic backup, and that could cause some problems. And so maybe it's addressed during the traffic plan, like if the board is asking about their traffic and how many trip generations, but And maybe the question from the board at that point is, well, what do you think how would you address queues if there's, vehicles that are waiting to get in? What's the process for that? Or,
I'm just talking about vehicles here, not pedestrians.
I'm just talking about vehicles, and this one I'm just talking about cars, and I'm thinking specifically of Northampton Street.
Right.
Or, I don't know if there is anything they can do about it, but I think it might be worth noting this language somewhere saying that they need to at least consider this when they're putting together their traffic plan, that there's gotta be some traffic control mechanisms in place. And maybe this is just, again, getting nervous about it and putting the horse in front of the cart a little bit, but I think it's worth having it in there,
Yeah.
just to say, we've thought about this,
And you should think
and
about
you
it
should
when
think
you're coming
about
up with
this
your business
too.
plan.
Right, as part
I
of
think
your
that's,
business
I
plan.
mean, I think both this and the language for the customer queuing is really difficult to kind of enforce, because I don't know how, I mean, if you own a business and there's people lining up on the street for it, like, how do you tell them not to line up outside of your business? Like, they're not even on your property at that point,
Right, but the
I
nuisance
think
complaints
it's-
that will come to
Right.
City Hall.
And that's
is
why I
that-
think it's
yeah.
important to have the language in there, and I don't think this is a long-term problem, but I think that we are getting out in front of this, and I think very early on, we may be one of the only places in town, in the state, and so I think that may lead to that kind of a scenario at the beginning, and so I think it probably is something that we wanna be out in front of for both vehicular and pedestrian queuing, at least having language in there that's kind of giving us something to rely on when we ask them about it and when we try to get them.
So my thought is that maybe under the submittal requirements where you're asking for a security plan, you're asking for the energy plan, that there's a request for a queuing plan.
Yeah,
And it's just
pedestrian
part of the
vehicle queuing.
submission requirements,
Yeah.
and that they have to submit a queuing plan that takes into consideration the offloaded parking queue in a public way, and the language that's in the food one, which I'll pull up now for the audience.
Yeah, so the food one says, and this is in respect to food carts, is the normal operation of the food cart, including line queues, shall not inhibit the movement of pedestrian or vehicular traffic along the public right-of-way.
I like your idea. I say put it in, but I remember you talked about the waiver concept before. I think there may be cases where the retail might be different enough that it's clear that.
Yeah.
it won't
Right,
have
so if
that
it's
kind of-
downtown, maybe it's not, or if it's in the mills, maybe it's not gonna be a big deal. But if it's on highway business and it's
Well, also, it may be something that if you simply ask someone, they may be able to do that verbally at a hearing instead of preparing a written plan, if it's gonna be more minor.
and a plan doesn't mean it has to be like bound and.
Right.
It just has to be a plan, like you've thought about it and here's.
Right.
This may
You know.
sound ridiculous, but how about valet parking? How would that,
If they have to.
If they have to do that as part, if that's what their solution to the problem is, maybe they could do that.
Yeah.
But leave it to them to figure that out.
Right.
I don't think the board should be figuring that out for them. I think it's the
interesting
board's
hearing.
responsibility to point it out to them and have them
Have them think about it and discuss it with us.
think about it and have a narrative in their application that discusses it.
That's good. All right.
Excellent.
Okay.
So we have a plan there.
What did I say?
I'm gonna make you come up here now.
Like a pedestrian vehicle queuing plan?
Yeah.
Marty Klein, 7 Stone Path Lane. Just wondering, if you had a situation where you had a very popular business, would it be up to the business owner to control the line so that it wasn't impeding traffic into adjacent businesses?
Yes.
That would be a concern.
Just like a restaurant or a bar has to control the number of people in the space.
I'll give you an
It's the
example that happened in Easthampton is when the horror place that was in the Button
the
building.
haunted house, yeah.
The haunted house.
Yeah.
And we had major line queue issues going up Union Street.
Yeah.
We had bathroom
We made them
issues
get
because
bathrooms in.
there was no place, people were going into 7-Eleven constantly asking them to use facilities. So the enforcement from the city side was that we required them to put portalets out for the duration of it because the line queue was causing problems for a neighboring business, 7-Eleven.
Right.
So
Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Karima Risk. I live at 38 Everett Street, and I'm happy to see you all. Thank you so much for working on this issue. I just wanted to offer also a perspective from working at NETA for that year when we were the only dispensary in Western Massachusetts. And one thing that I haven't heard in the conversation yet, but I think was an important distinction for them was before and after operating hours.
So, for example, they would have something exciting on the menu or high demand it would come and step back and they had their parking lot. And that's certainly something I'm looking at for my business, all these issues you're considering. But I'm thinking about the zoning conversation on downtown business where there isn't a lot of space to queue, and wondering how a retail recreational marijuana business could be open in when they're closed. Let's say it's overnight and you have preventing the public from coming in at like 7 in the morning. If somebody wants to stand on that street, I'm not saying that's a situation I want, but I'm trying to think from a business owner's perspective, how do you regulate or control the queue outside of operational hours? When, if someone wants to be crazy and stand there at 2 in the morning, is the business owner responsible for that? Or, you know, in downtown business versus during opening hours when you're physically there on site and able to kind of from 8 a.m. till whenever, you know, wherever you're open. Just a thought.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I mean, we're coming up on Black Friday, right? There's probably people in line right now already.
Well, you see that at really popular tattoo places like Off the Map, where they offer the free tattoo.
Yep.
And 100 people will line up, and 7 of them will get tattoos, and they're amazing tattoos, I'm sure. But those people are there early, like way in advance.
And those are one-day events, both Black Friday and that.
Okay.
This is going to be something that's open
Regularly,
on a more regular basis.
Sure.
I was trying to find something in New York City because, you know, there's enough restaurants and like on a Sunday brunch lines, and you get in the queue, and I couldn't find anything. So
No, I even looked in Washington State about the requirements to have that waiting room that I saw, not Washington, in
Colorado, yeah.
And I couldn't find anything for queuing in any of the regulations, but they all have these big waiting areas so that people aren't queuing in the street.
Maybe it's
I don't know how to require it.
maybe there's something in the regs that talks about the queuing in
Yeah.
the state regs, and they
In the
just
state regs, yeah,
and they
maybe
just
I
abide
didn't-
by it.
I like the idea of having something in there about queuing.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll add queue plan.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Okay.
I
Now
think that's all our stuff.
Mm-mm.
No? What do you got?
Parking.
Oh, yeah.
Parking requirements. So where was this? Renton, Washington. All right. I know, we're all hungry. Okay.
All right.
Because we needed to do this, we're running on time, and we did it.
Yes, and we're doing excellent
Not to be
work.
condescending, but I'm proud of
Let's
everyone
pat ourselves
here.
in the back.
All right,
Getting a
find
lot
it.
done today.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This parking one was, I think, kind of crazy.
Yeah, so
7, it looks like. Yeah, there you go.
5 spots
So-
per 1,000 square feet.
Wait, that's a minimum.
A minimum of 4
a
and a maximum.
minimum of 4 and a
maximum of
maximum of
5.
5 per 1,000 square feet of net floor area. So
Wow.
in our parking regs, we have for retail, for standard retail, you have to have 1 space for every 300 square feet of gross floor area.
Oh.
And maybe that's just, I just want to bring it up on whether we need to have a different standard, or whether our retail is fine, our industrial is much more lax because it's just for the workers mostly, so we can just leave it under that and just leave it as so, but I just felt like it's important to at least talk about
Personally,
it.
this is so hard for me because I really believe that it's going to be crazy at first and then it's not, and so like and I don't know.
And do we need to put in a bunch of impervious surface that's not gonna be
That's
needed
not going
later
to be
on?
used
And
like
that's
a
not
year later.
environmentally
Right, so like
needed.
that, my problem is, I mean, I fully expect that a retail establishment will have full parking when it starts, but like, it may not a year later, and so like, I have a lot of ambivalence about this, and I, like both ways, I really don't know.
I don't either.
I think you have to plan for the year out. I think our existing rules on parking are.
So 1
good.
space for every 300 feet for retail, and leave that as is.
Let's do that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, we'll see what
I mean, the
city
question
council and the public wants to do at future public hearings, but I don't,
Okay.
I
So
certainly
should
can't
I
push
put,
away from that.
should I put something in the draft that at least references that the parking's, I don't even know, or do I just leave it?
No, you should put something in here so we know to discuss it, because otherwise we wouldn't put anything in about parking, right? And it would just be that you'd look at the retail parking.
You know, we're just gonna say.
Parking shall be consistent with the retail requirements in the state. That's-
Our existing code.
I would do that.
I think we should put that in if
And
only
highlight
to make it, also to make it clear to an applicant, so they only have to look one
Yep.
spot.
I agree.
The thing that I come up with though, like say they have a space that's half of the space is just a waiting area, so there's no queuing in the street, but then the other half is the actual
Right.
retail space.
Right, does it
How do you
discourage,
calculate that?
or does
now
it
you're required to
discourage
have
that
more parking.
space?
Right, does it discourage the
Does it
waiting
discourage
area?
the indoor waiting
so
area?
you have only
Well,
you know,
downtown,
300 square feet of
you'll
space.
be grandfathered anyway, right? I mean, downtown business doesn't.
It's, yes,
Depends on the
as long
building.
as, so as long as the building's been in place since before the 1972, but there's another one that it's like if you're building a new, so say there's a vacant lot and somebody's putting a new building, they have
Yeah.
to provide off-street parking. And it's tricky, because I've been working with an applicant who wants to put in a multifamily, but the parking configuration is
Oh, yeah.
very tricky, because he has to put in off-street parking because it's required. He's putting a new building in downtown, or he wants to.
If I understand correctly, this
So-
problem that we're describing here of maybe they have half for lobby, maybe half retail, but that problem could exist for any number of different types of businesses.
Right.
And the standard we apply is one for every 300,
Right.
whatever. So I think just stick with what we've got.
Yeah, but let's reference it in the code both so that we know to have the discussion later and so applicants know that this is what the parking is.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge.
Okay. All right. I think now that's it.
Okay.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Well done, thank you.
Okay,
Just-
so,
Can we talk the timeline just a little bit?
Yes.
Are you ready to talk timeline, Jessica? Or are you
well, so this is what I was just about to propose. So, I'll work to get all of these changes. I don't know if you need to open it up to the public, by the way, for any other additional comments. Sorry
probably
before I
do.
start going, but,
I-
so my thought is, that I would incorporate all of this, have a draft for your next meeting, and then, from there, you know, we can.
We're on our own.
You are totally.
Good luck. You
You'll
know,
still-
Jamie could certainly assist on this and
Yeah.
getting it, but I'd like to see you guys get pretty damn close by the end of the next meeting, so there's a good solid draft. And, I mean, nothing's prohibiting you from submitting it in December to council for consideration in January. I
Right.
mean, they would have it on January 2nd when they're sworn in.
That would be my
This is
goal.
your green legacy.
My green legacy.
All right, so
I usually like to
Can
talk
I
about
ask
the
about
boardwalk as
Jamie?
part of my
I know.
legacy,
Yeah,
but.
and a great one. Are you planning on having a big download session with Jamie? I just needed, like,
Jamie's been out on medical leave for several weeks and she's not back to the 5th, so I have yet to really talk to Jamie about the transition plan. I had to text her to let her know I was leaving, so, so that still needs to
Okay.
be discussed. I do intend to put everything in a document, but, yeah.
Is there anyone else here who has anything to say tonight about this stuff, realizing that we're gonna have future steps, but I don't wanna cut anyone off? Okay.
that's like, please.
I want to say one more thing.
Yep, will you come up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Sorry, 'cause I'm turning it over in my mind, especially since I brought up that whole issue. Owen Zaret, 74 Florence Road. So I just wanted to go back quickly to, in terms of the stipulation with the number of retail businesses, and I understand there might be state guidelines that are going to address this, but I was thinking that when you know, especially fair competition. So when we explicitly limit the number of businesses, i.e. stipulating a certain amount of number, or make the number of businesses we can have that's relative or to, for instance, places with alcohol licenses, I think that limits us too much. And I think we want to encourage free and fair economy, also a creative economy. A lot of what Jim was discussing in terms of these minor home businesses, I think we need to create distinctions between that and major retail locations. So that's one thing that we have to create within the language of any ordinance that we put forth. So what I'm getting at is I think the way that we implicitly limit the number of retail businesses is just discussing buffers, because that only gives you then so many combinations and permutations of retail space. And just take the whole discussion of actual finite businesses that you can have just out of it altogether. And I think that might be the best way to go about it. So that's just.
And I think that's probably why a lot of the other cities and towns do have buffers, especially in other states, because I think there have been prohibitions on limiting the number of businesses, but if you say they got to be 500 feet apart, you're just limiting it by the geography of the town. So I think that's a fair point.
Right, I don't know that should be 500 feet.
No, but I'm
yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
well, the other thing is
But
that a
50,
lot of
they'd be
the stuff
everywhere.
we're looking at are much bigger cities, right? So if
Correct.
you're talking about, you know, Denver, Colorado, or whatever, it's a totally different ballgame than Easthampton. So the numbers are all bigger, I think, because of that. But I think that's a good point.
Yeah, so that's all I'd say too. And it encourages competition, but again, fair competition. So That's all.
we've discussed the limit on the number several times and have never done anything, and I don't think any of us are, I'm certainly not convinced on the tying it to the alcohol or not. I think it's important to have something in there so that we all know going forward that this is a topic to discuss, but
I'm convinced I don't like tying it to alcohol.
Yeah. And,
I agree with what, I
Now that I've
forget
thought
your,
about it more, I
Rebecca.
agree. It
I
should
think
be tied to
Rebecca
alcohol.
made a really poignant point as we go on with this discussion, more in terms of the kind of social and moral aspects of this issue, is that there is too much of this old stigma that we're trying to get rid of with legalization of cannabis and retail cannabis. And so tying it to alcohol is I think it's a slippery slope.
Yep.
So
I agree.
Yeah.
Now that I mentioned it.
that's
Very
all.
good.
I retract my
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
anybody else?
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
All right.
So what do you want me to do? You want me to take it out, or you wanna leave it in?
Strike
For
it.
now?
I think, well, we should keep
No,
something
I
in there,
think
but I don't know if it should
probably
be related.
leave
to
it in
alcohol.
and
Or
then we
Do you wanna-
eight,
do you-
or
No,
no
no, no.
blanks.
Do you wanna do this?
Or
So
12.
what I just heard is that we could either do it by limiting the buffers or limiting the number, but right now you have both. So
Right.
do you wanna leave it as both right now and leave it as a topic of discussion to?
What if we put in 12? Are people comfortable with 12 as a number? I mean, I don't even know if that's the right
Why
number,
don't we
but
just leave it at 12 and we can discuss it down the road?
It'll get chopped when it gets to subcommittee.
Yeah, more than
Ordinance.
likely.
Well, we've done our due
If he's on
diligence.
ordinance, he doesn't know yet.
We don't
I'm
know.
positive.
He could be on public safety for all we know.
The buffer's only 50 feet. You could have,
I'm just gonna
you could
make
have
a motion
600
that
of them,
we
right?
adjourn,
Yeah.
that's all.
12. That moves it from 8 to 12 for now.
Let's just say
That's
12 and have
okay.
it not related to alcohol.
yeah.
Okay.
All right. I make
Yeah,
a
and the other part would be
motion.
the
Are we done?
open, like the open end on the minimum,
Thank you.
the home grown thing. we're
Oh,
talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
That could be like almost, who cares how many?
Yeah, they're,
Yep.
they're unlimited right now.
Right, you can have
Okay.
300.
Okay, we're
All
all
right,
set
thank
at 8
you.
o'clock?
Thank you.
Adjourn.
No, we're not done yet.
Oh, yeah, we're done.
Oh, no, we are
We
not done,
signed.
people.
No, but I do think we should
I do
continue the
too.
sign.
No,
So-
well, I have a better proposal. I think you need to continue it without me. I think you need to, it doesn't make sense for me to be working on it
No.
at the end of my tenure here. I think
Right.
it gets,
Put it off till
I think you put it off
2019,
until
2020.
2018. That'd be my recommendation.
Right,
I'm
2021.
a little sad right
All right.
I agree with 2020.
I don't know how long, but I do think we should use your presence in the next meeting and
I
between
think we
now
need
and
to
then
focus on
the
this.
marijuana stuff. So I'm okay continuing that.
I motion to continue our discussion on the sign ordinance till after the next meeting.
Well, so is that December,
Do you wanna say
December
until
19th?
until the board has completed the recreational
Until the
marijuana?
Yeah.
board has, I modify my amendment to say until the board has completed the recreational marijuana zoning.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Now you're done.
To adjourn.
I motioned to adjourn. Did you already motion? I seconded
Yes,
it.
I did.
Okay, there we go. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Let me get the camera.
Thank all of you.